The story begins with the glittering, high-ceilinged expanse of a royal ballroom, where the atmosphere thickens with the unspoken tension of high society. A man of striking elegance, his dark hair framing a face damp with perspiration, stands as the center of gravity in the crowded hall. This is a moment of public scrutiny, the air filled with the murmur of aristocrats and the rustle of fine silks. Suddenly, the refined ambience shatters violently as a cascade of liquid splashes through the air, catching the light before drenching the man's impeccable formal attire. The shockwave of this action ripples through the bystanders. A mustached gentleman gasps in horror, while a lady nearby recoils, her hand flying to her mouth in disbelief at the audacity of the event. The perspective shifts to the perpetrator, a young woman whose internal composure has completely disintegrated. She stammers uncontrollably, her words fracturing under the weight of her panic. "I'm sorry," she blurts out, the apology hanging heavily in the silence that follows the splash. A sound effect denotes the sheer impact of the moment, underscoring the gravity of her social transgression. This is Cecile Rosewood, a woman now branded by her actions, standing terrified as the reality of her crime sets in. She screams in a rising crescendo of regret, her voice cracking as she realizes the magnitude of her error. Tears stream down her face as she bows deeply, her body language screaming submission and desperation. She wails that she has made a terrible mistake, her apologies tumbling over one another in a frantic attempt to mitigate the disaster she has caused. The narrative pulls back to establish the context of this calamitous evening. This is a ceremony held within the castle walls, honoring the participants of the second campaign to eradicate magical beasts. The man now dripping with liquid is no ordinary noble. He is a celebrated hero who performed exceptionally well in the last campaign. His Majesty, the King, has granted him the supreme honor of becoming one of the 7 elite knights. As is his custom, he stands surrounded by adoring crowds, a fixture of admiration and desire. This is Lord Oswald Cleaver, the commander of the First Order of the Holy Knights, a man renowned not only for his captivating handsomeness but also for his status as Duke Freya. The women of the court swarm him, desperate to get closer, vying for his favor and hoping to win his heart. Gossiping nobles observe the scene with keen interest. One woman remarks that she would be more than happy if rumors about her and Lord Oswald were to circulate. Her companion, skeptical, questions whether she truly wants to be chased by gossip columns despite being married. The allure of Oswald Cleaver is potent. He is the subject of countless romantic rumors, his name spreading like wildfire through high society due to his striking looks, fame, and bravery. He is the unassailable hero, the center of attention. And yet, Cecile's crime was simple and bizarre. She poured a special elixir directly onto his face. Her reasoning, shouted amidst her panic, was that his complexion appeared oddly pale, a concern that drove her to this drastic measure. The droplets of the elixir fall from his face, punctuating the silence. Cecile's internal experience reveals a different reality beneath the glittering surface of the party. To her eyes, Oswald was not merely a handsome duke but a figure surrounded by a dense and unnatural black aura. As a white witch who had seriously considered abandoning her path to become a pharmacist due to her perceived failures, her reaction was instinctual and professional. She perceived a real threat, a darkness slowly seeping toward her, and felt compelled to act fast. She could not simply stand still while this ominous energy encroached upon her. The air crackles with magic as Oswald retaliates, his eyes glowing with power. Oswald raises his hand, and the atmosphere shifts from social embarrassment to magical combat. He unleashes the Earth Seal, a defensive magic used by knights to restrain opponents. Ribbons of magical energy erupt, wrapping tightly around Cecile, binding her arms and legs in an instant. She recognizes the spell immediately, her expertise as a witch allowing her to identify the binding magic. Despite being bound, Cecile continues to plead her case, insisting that the elixir she used was praised by her mentors and confirmed to be effective. She argues that as a white witch, it was her duty to intervene and take care of his health, driven by a professional obligation that overrode social etiquette. She apologizes profusely for embarrassing him in front of everyone but maintains that the potion is absolutely not harmful. Oswald, ignoring her explanations, steps closer and scoops her up. Cecile flusters, telling him he doesn't need to hold her so tightly and swearing she won't run away, acknowledging that she lacks the skill to undo the Earth Seal spell anyway. Magical runes encircle them as Oswald prepares to depart, the air humming with the intensity of his spell casting. Cecile screams as the gravity of the situation, and the literal gravity, shifts. She begs him to handle the situation calmly, her voice rising in panic. Oswald leaps from the balcony, carrying the bound Cecile in a princess carry. They soar through the night air, wind rushing past them as they leave the castle grounds behind. Cecile lets out a terrified shriek. Oswald, stoic and unbothered by her distress, simply commands her to shut up. The scene transitions to the exterior of a grand estate, The Duke's mansion, illuminated by the moon and the warm glow of interior lights. A carriage waits in the courtyard, but Oswald bypasses the conventional entrance. He lands with a heavy thud, the impact startling the staff. Oswald strides through the back door of the mansion, still carrying the mummified Cecile. The household staff, a maid and a butler, stare in open-mouthed shock. They whisper furiously amongst themselves, questioning why the Duke entered from the back door and, more pressingly, asking, "What about that girl?" Oswald ignores them completely, marching past with determination while magical runes continue to float around Cecile's bound form. He carries her into a luxurious bedroom and unceremoniously dumps her onto the soft mattress. Cecile, still bound and terrified, demands to know what he is planning to do to her. Oswald, looking annoyed, retorts that he isn't going to do anything and asks what nonsense she is spouting. Cecile is skeptical, questioning his claim that he won't do anything, her mind racing with the implications of being brought to a bedroom. She stammers that it crossed her mind that he might exact some sort of revenge or have darker intentions. She points out the suspicious nature of bringing the culprit who embarrassed him to such a luxurious room in the Duke's mansion if he truly planned nothing. Oswald glares at her, his expression cold and dismissive. He brutally insults her, stating that her scrawny, unattractive body does not interest him at all. He adds the final blow, "You're not even my type." Cecile, stung by the insult to her appearance, reacts with indignation rather than relief. She shouts that his denial is suspicious in itself. Oswald tells her to be quiet. Cecile, unable to let the insult slide, retorts that maybe if she took off her clothes, she would look amazing, though she immediately questions how he would know she's unattractive without seeing anything yet. She fixates on the words, scrawny and unattractive, clearly offended. Oswald, unimpressed, reiterates that she isn't his type and claims that, to be honest, there doesn't seem to be much to admire. He emphasizes this by leaning over her, his gaze critical. Cecile suddenly pauses, wondering why she is even discussing this with him. She asserts that she doesn't care whether she is popular or not. Oswald interrupts her train of thought, revealing a glimpse of his own exhaustion. He confesses that the women who try to get close to him have been nothing but a nuisance. Cecile, still processing his earlier insults, mutters that men who only see women for superficial appearances aren't popular in this era. She begins to understand the reality behind the rumors. While noble ladies, aristocrats, and widows line up for him and newspapers praise him as the hero, the man behind the smile is different. She realizes that what happened at the party, the accolades, the attention, was just another medal of honor to him, another piece of his shining glory. However, she notes that behind his polite smile, there are things she never imagined. Oswald asks if anyone has ever told her she talks too much. Suddenly, the sound of fabric rustling cuts through the conversation. Cecile freezes as she realizes Oswald is taking off his clothes. She screams, asking since when he started stripping. Oswald calmly replies that he does this all the time and asks if she has ever considered stopping her chatter. He tells her to shut up again, reminding her that he told her to stay quiet. He tosses his shirt aside with a heavy sound. Cecile tries to protest, arguing that in a dangerous situation like this, she can't just stay silent. Oswald notes her sudden silence, observing that she was chattering nonstop just a moment ago. He deduces that her silence can only mean one thing: she has noticed the wound. The narrative focus shifts to Oswald's torso, which is marred by a dark, gruesome injury emitting a black aura. Cecile stares in horror. She admits that she has never seen an injury emitting such a dark, ominous aura before. Even with her limited experience as a white witch, she recognizes the severity of the wound immediately. The aura is palpable, a physical manifestation of corruption. Cecile asks if he received this injury during the last battle against the demonic beast. Oswald confirms it with a vague, something like that. Cecile presses him, pointing out that he fought side by side with Lady Lorelei, one of the 7 newly appointed white witches. She reasons that if the wound is this severe, Lady Lorelei must know about it. She recalls that nothing was mentioned about him sustaining such a serious injury at the party or in the papers. She emphasizes that Lorelei is one of the most powerful sorceresses in their village. Oswald turns away, his expression somber, and reveals the truth. She doesn't know. Cecile is baffled, asking why. Oswald explains that Lorelei possesses extraordinary healing abilities and a heart full of compassion. Cecile, putting the pieces together in her own way, gasps dramatically. She wonders if Lady Lorelei is about to become the next victim of the scandal papers. She accuses Oswald of hiding the injury because the two of them are in love, and he doesn't want Lorelei to worry about him. She frantically warns him that if he hasn't told her about such a serious wound, it could lead to disaster. Oswald recalls the battle, describing how Lorelei created a massive protective barrier that saved countless lives, earning her the title of White Witch and one of the 7 Braves. Oswald abruptly shuts down Cecile's romantic fantasies, stating that there is nothing between him and Lorelei. He calls her ideas ridiculous fantasies, and admits that the mere thought of there being something between them is incredibly annoying. Cecile, undeterred, speculates that perhaps Lorelei prefers someone serious and responsible, like Sir Jude, the boxer among the Seven Braves, rather than a man with a bad reputation like Oswald who acts like a Black Panther. She praises Lorelei as noble, elegant, humble, and kind, asserting that everyone in the White Witch's village loves and respects her, making her a wonderful wife material. Oswald snaps, telling her to shut up again. He leans in close, declaring that what matters right now is her. He states that her stories about Lorelei or his reputation in high society are irrelevant to him at this moment. Oswald reveals the strategic reason for his secrecy. He hid his injury from most of the Legion members because knowledge of it could hurt their morale. He explains that ever since he received the wound, his health has been deteriorating due to the dark energy coursing through his body. He avoided seeking the White Witches for healing and instead tried various medicines, but none of them worked. There was barely any effect. He admits he didn't even want to attend the party that day. However, when Cecile poured that strange medicine on him, he felt something for the first time. Oswald demands answers. He leans over the bed, his face inches from hers, and asks exactly what that potion was that she poured on him earlier. The intensity of the interrogation is broken by a sudden shout from the doorway. The door bursts open, and a man named Zach barges in, furious. He yells at Oswald, calling him lucky with his status and complaining that Oswald left him with all the trouble while relaxing in the mansion. Zach, the vice commander, explains that he had to deal with a group of furious women crying over Oswald's disappearance. He shouts, asking what Oswald thinks he is doing leaving the royal palace and coming back like nothing happened. Oswald calmly asks if it is polite to barge into someone's room without knocking. Zach freezes as he takes in the scene before him. He sees Oswald, half naked, looming over a woman tied up in magical ribbons on his bed. Cecile, flustered, tries to explain that she was just talking nonstop. She realizes that initially she thought this situation might work in her favor, but now she sees that everyone was looking for Oswald, and she was just a background character. Oswald tries to clarify that the situation is not the result of uncontrollable lust or a passionate romantic moment. Zach, however, is already drawing his own conclusions. He bursts into laughter, unable to contain himself. Cecile yells at him to shut up, asking if he doesn't think his reaction is a little harsh. She argues that there is no way a man like Oswald would be attracted to a girl like her with no charm whatsoever, repeating the insults Oswald threw at her earlier. Oswald tells her to stop with the nonsense. Cecile defends herself, claiming that while she may not be Oswald's type, her face is at least somewhat cute. Zach continues to laugh hysterically, ignoring their explanations. The chapter ends with Zach's laughter echoing in the room, Oswald looking annoyed, and Cecile bound on the bed, the door having been opened to chaos. A place of quiet power, it is presided over by the village elder, Curtis, a man of long silver hair and the highest authority in white magic, who has never left the village yet commands immense respect. Standing before him in a room lined with towering bookshelves is Lord Oswald, a figure whose reputation in the royal capital oscillates between a mysterious, handsome noble secretly admired by women and a Black Panther of formidable intensity. Curtis questions the commander's presence in such a remote location. Oswald, dressed in a sharp suit that contrasts with the rustic magical setting, reveals his purpose with a stoic demeanor. He recounts the events of the previous night, where he had the opportunity to be bathed in a potion concocted by one of the village's own. The narrative focus shifts to the perpetrator of this incident, Cecile Rosewood, who kneels on the floor, sweat dropping from her brow as she faces her master's scrutiny. Curtis interrogates his disciple, dismantling her defenses with calm logic. He reminds her that she was only attending the banquet as an escort to Lorelei due to her own lack of ability, a kindness she solicited because she might never otherwise see the royal palace. Cecile, flustered and defensive, attempts to justify her actions. She mimics a clawed hand, describing how she sensed an incredible amount of evil energy stretching toward her from Oswald. In her panic, she grabbed her potion and splashed it, a reflex born of fear rather than malice. Curtis summarizes the absurdity of the situation. She dumped a whole bottle of antidote on the holy knight captain. Cecile, unable to contain her entrepreneurial spirit even in disgrace, admits she thought it might be a good chance to market her medicine to high-ranking nobles. Curtis stares at her, unimpressed that she brought potion bottles to the palace. Oswald interjects, cutting through the master-disciple dynamic. He demands that Curtis entrust Cecile to him for a while. He frames this demand as a matter of responsibility. She must answer for the embarrassment she caused him before the entire aristocracy. Curtis, displaying a shocking lack of resistance, immediately agrees, telling Oswald to take her and do as he pleases. Cecile recoils in horror, accusing her master of selling her off like a corrupt slave trader. Oswald clarifies his intentions, his gaze cold and professional. He states for the record that he has no personal interest in her. His motivation is strictly medical. He reveals that since a previous battle against a magical beast, he has sustained an injury tainted with dark energy that has been deteriorating his health. He lists the symptoms: headache, stomach pain, heartburn, discomfort, shortness of breath, and admits that the antidote Cecil splashed on him dramatically improved his condition, albeit temporarily. He asserts that her antidote is the only thing that works for him. Curtis, ever the protective guardian despite his earlier dismissal, probes Oswald's reasoning. He asks why Oswald does not seek the help of Lorelei, the most skilled healer in the village aside from himself. Oswald explains the political and social complications. Seeking Lorelei's treatment privately would fuel the already rampant rumors of a romance between them, tarnishing her reputation. Furthermore, his injury is classified information, revealing its severity could affect the morale of his troops. He tried various medicines to avoid involving a white mage, but only Cecil's concoction had any effect. Curtis accepts this logic but issues a warning. He asks Oswald to confirm he does not intend to take advantage of his disciple. Oswald dismisses the idea with a scoff, and Cecil, stung, grumbles that he is at least being honest about his disinterest. Curtis approaches Oswald to inspect the wound personally. Oswald unbuttons his shirt, revealing a torso marred by a jagged, dark scar. Curtis observes that for those with low magic power, the miasma is invisible, but to his trained eye, the wound and the attached miasma are quite serious. He notes that a defensive magic circle is currently preventing the miasma from spreading. Under normal circumstances, detoxification and curse removal of this magnitude would require a high-level mage. However, Curtis identifies something unique in Cecil's intervention. He realizes that Cecil's purification ability is not standard. It differs fundamentally from both his own high-level magic and Lorelei's techniques. He declares it a rare gift. Cecil, hearing this praise, is stunned. She honestly never thought she had much talent as a white mage. Oswald dresses, buttoning his shirt as the arrangement is finalized. Cecil, realizing the implications, shifts from fear to opportunism. If she treats the Holy Knight Commander, she can advertise her medicine as the cure favored by the Seven Sages and Oswald Cleaver. She envisions a future where her apothecary is famous. Oswald watches her calculate, noting she is accepting for purely selfish reasons. He remarks that while she lacks the social masks worn by high society, she is at least honest. Oswald looks at Cecil, acknowledging that she doesn't look bad either. Cecil, eager for her first solo mission and the publicity it entails, begs to be allowed to do it. Curtis agrees, telling Oswald to do as he likes, but warns Cecil that the real issue is whether she can handle Oswald, given the rumors. Cecil confidently asserts she will rely on her potions if things get tough. The scene transitions to the village exterior. A carriage awaits to transport them. Curtis watches them leave, thinking that even if she is a dropout, she is still his disciple. He silently warns Oswald not to let her end up like the women you've been involved with before. A flashback reveals Curtis preparing Cecil for the journey. He hands her a basket of potions and her favorite foods. He explains the color coding of the special potions. The blue potion closes something, while the red-purple one opens it. He advises her to use them wisely if needed during treatment. Back in the present, inside the moving carriage, Cecil holds up a potion. She explains to Oswald that it will prevent his body from expelling the accumulated miasma and aid in detoxification. Oswald asks what it is, noting the color is different from the previous days. Cecil cheerfully reveals it is a laxative. Oswald's composure cracks. He shouts, "Like hell I'm drinking that." Cecil insists, explaining that he needs to take it before the evil energy kills him. She tries to reassure him that it's a little different from a regular laxative and that he can hold off until the very last minute in an emergency. Oswald, horrified at the prospect of losing his dignity in a carriage, demands yesterday's medicine instead. Cecil bluntly informs him that the previous medicine was for bathing, and he can't bathe in a carriage. Cecil proposes an alternative, a topical ointment that absorbs evil energy when applied to wounds. However, she warns that if he doesn't wipe it off and reapply it every 3 hours, the evil energy will spread, potentially causing erectile dysfunction. Oswald, faced with terrible options, chooses the ointment. He questions what kind of terrifying medicine she is trying to use on him. Cecil offers one last thing for symptom relief, a fever and pain reliever that is mostly still waiting for clinical trials. Oswald realizes he is effectively a guinea pig. The journey, originally planned for 3 days, stretches to 4 because of the strong diuretic effect of the medicine Cecil administered. They arrive in the northernmost part of the kingdom, the Freya Duke's territory, a landscape dominated by a towering mountain said to have once been a sacred peak. Cecil marvels at the mysterious spring halfway up the mountain where a saint is said to have trained. As they trudge through the snow, Oswald snaps at Cecil to stop chatting about useless things and carry the luggage. Cecil complains about his double standards, asking why he treats other women with kindness but treats her poorly. Oswald retorts that if she spoke more modestly like the ladies of high society, he would gladly show her his smile. Cecil ignores the insult, sensing a powerful aura in the forest similar to the spirit forest in her village. They arrive at the mansion, exhausted. Zack, the vice commander, greets them, noting the commander's fatigue. He observes that while Oswald acts tough, claiming women ask too many questions, he lacks the strength to maintain that facade. In Oswald's quarters, Cecil offers him a potion to recover the strength used during the journey. Oswald, now deeply suspicious of her concoctions, asks if it will cause diarrhea, nausea, headaches, or erectile dysfunction. Cecil assures him it doesn't have a diuretic effect. She defends the potion, citing a sales permit that claims the week-old cat became lively again. Oswald stares at the bottle, calling it super shady, but Cecil insists it worked on her family cat. Oswald drinks it. The effect is immediate, his eyes clear, and his vitality returns. He looks at Cecil and catches her off guard with a genuine compliment. "You have beautiful eyes." Cecil blushes, flustered by the sudden shift in his demeanor. However, Oswald quickly pivots back to business, telling her to relax and rest so they can begin proper treatment. He reverts to his teasing attitude, leaving Cecil wondering if this is some kind of punishment game. The narrative shifts back to the royal capital, where the social elite are buzzing with rumors. Noblewomen discuss the disappearance of Lord Oswald and the vice commander after the banquet. They speculate that Oswald might be courting Lady Lorelei. Lady Lorelei sits amongst them, elegant and composed. She denies the rumors, stating she has no connection with him and that they don't know anything about each other. The noblewomen insist they make a perfect match. Lorelei, however, remembers the other white mage apprentice who accompanied her. The gossip turns to Cecil. The noblewomen dismiss her as a failure who is supposed to become a full-fledged mage but lacks the skills. They claim Lord Curtis is looking for another path for her because she couldn't do much on her own. They recount the accident, where she tripped and spilled her drink on Oswald, ruining the banquet. Lorelei listens, realizing the misconception. She decides she must write a letter to Lord Curtis to ensure he doesn't scold Cecil too much, protecting her apprentice from the fallout of the rumors. The chapter concludes with Lorelei softly speaking the name of the one truly at the center of this unfolding drama, Cecil Rosewood. A solitary figure navigating a dense, verdant landscape, their thoughts occupied by the logistics of a recent excursion. Cecil, the white mage, reflects on her journey, noting that her return to the village had been delayed significantly because the procurement of necessary supplies took longer than she had initially anticipated. She clutches her purchases, finding a small measure of solace in the fact that she at least succeeded in acquiring a cute doll amidst the errands. However, the darkening sky presses upon her, driving her to quicken her pace with the singular goal of returning home before the last light fades. The scene shifts to the enveloping night, where an unnatural stillness suffocates the environment. A lantern casts a fragile glow against the encroaching dark, illuminating the text of the silence. It is a profound, disturbing quiet. The usual nocturnal symphony is absent. There are no cries from night birds, no rustling whispers of the wind through the leaves, and not even the heavy rhythmic thrum of beastly footsteps upon the earth. This absolute void of sound unsettles the traveler, prompting a mental interrogation of the anomaly. The urgency intensifies, the traveler's internal compass locking onto the destination of the village and the safety of family, driving the need to hurry. Suddenly, violence erupts in a flashback or a concurrent event elsewhere in the woods. A man's face contorts in shock as a dark, slashing force tears through the air. The impact is visceral, sending a lantern spinning through the void to crash against the ground, its glass likely shattering as the light skews wildly across the vegetation. Meanwhile, within the safety of a well-furnished room, Lord Oswald stirs from a deep slumber. Sunlight streams through the window, bathing the room in a serene brightness that contrasts sharply with the dark visions of the forest. He sits up in bed, analyzing his physical state with the precision of a warrior. He acknowledges that the energy restoration potion provided by Cecil was remarkably effective. Although he recalls the liquid possessing an extreme, palate-wrecking bitterness, he notes with satisfaction that there are no adverse side effects. Instead, a strange, buoyant lightness permeates his body, signaling a recovery of his vitality. Oswald rises, fully dressed in a crisp white shirt and dark trousers, and moves toward the door. The restoration of his energy brings with it a primal demand, hunger. He realizes he needs to find food immediately. As he walks, a question creates a pause in his momentum. He wonders if he slept through an entire day. Through a window, he observes two figures outside, Cecil and his subordinate, Zack. His mind races to tactical concerns, wondering if Zack has already resumed leadership of the first squad. Oswald's internal monologue shifts to the strategic reality of their situation. He reasons that since the nature of the entity they face is unknown, the only viable course of action is to advance and investigate personally. He considers the encounter patterns, noting that only one entity has appeared thus far, which raises the question of whether it was a reconnaissance unit or a guard. He feels as though fate itself is issuing a warning to remain alert. He approaches the door, intending to join the others, admitting to himself that while he intended to rest briefly, he ended up staying longer than planned. Outside, the conversation between Cecil and Zack halts as they notice their commander. Oswald steps out, blinking in the daylight, and mentions he feels much better. Zack, offering a welcoming gesture, asks if the commander has finally regained consciousness. Oswald casually mentions sleeping, but the revelation hits him with the force of a physical blow when Zack clarifies the duration. Oswald is stunned to learn he has been asleep for 3 full days. Zack, maintaining a calm demeanor, rationalizes that after a 3-day slumber, any exhaustion would naturally vanish. He praises the potency of the medicine, marveling that such an effective remedy is available in common markets. Cecil, flustered by the backhanded nature of the compliment, retorts that the medicine's effectiveness is obvious and shouldn't be a subject of surprise. Zack politely bows, claiming honor in hearing that. He then informs Oswald that when 2 days passed without him waking, the squad began to worry. Oswald, still grappling with the lost time, demands confirmation. Zack affirms that a full 3 days have elapsed. He theorizes that Oswald's body likely entered a state akin to hibernation. This temporary dormant state allowed his body to aggressively restore its magical energy and vitality. Zack explains their anxiety stemmed from the fact that they had never heard of the medicine causing a coma before. Oswald scowls, rubbing his neck, annoyed that losing consciousness for 3 days is not a trivial matter to be ignored. However, he concedes that he feels better. Cecil steps in, framing the situation positively by noting that waking up in only 3 days is proof of Oswald's exceptional physique. The conversation pivots sharply to business as Zack reports that a magical beast has appeared near a neighboring village. Oswald's demeanor instantly hardens into that of a commander, demanding to know what happened. Zack prepares to deliver a full report on the events of the missed 3 days. Cecil interrupts, asserting her involvement. Oswald turns to her, pointing out that as a white healer, she lacks the necessary combat skills to participate in monster elimination. He argues she is not supposed to interfere. Cecil counters, revealing that ordinary villagers with no magic experience participated in reconnaissance missions for the extermination squads. She argues that if untrained civilians are involved, then others, implying herself, have the right to know how this misfortune affects everyone. She firmly places herself within the scope of the issue. Cecil strengthens her argument by reminding Oswald that she treated his wounds, neutralized the poison, and removed the cursed enchantments. Therefore, he cannot exclude her. Oswald, cornered by her logic, concedes but sets a strict condition. If she completes a full month of training, she will be allowed to participate. He suggests she apply to join the rear ranks of the extermination squad. Cecil, shocked by the timeline, asks if she is really allowed to be away for an entire month. Oswald suggests that if the white mage sent as her replacement succeeds in lifting his curse, that would be for the best. The tension diffuses slightly as Zack steps in, smiling, and suggests the commander has said enough. He offers to brief Oswald on the available information regarding the recently appeared magical beast. Zack teases Oswald, reminding him that he was bedridden for 3 days, while signaling Cecil to come with him. Zack remarks that regarding this specific matter, Cecil actually knows more than Oswald does. Walking through the corridors, Oswald grumbles that he wishes someone had warned him about the unconsciousness side effect beforehand. Cecil awkwardly looks away, admitting she didn't think he had the skill to do something like that, referring to the deep hibernation. She adds that if he had communicated the depth of his unwellness, she would have adjusted the dosage. She defends her actions, stating she feels well enough to act boldly now. Zack observes the interaction, thinking that Oswald was pushing himself too hard because there was no other choice. Zack watches the two, noting internally that it is rare to see the commander treat a woman this way. He reflects on Oswald's past. In his late teens and early 20s, Oswald had plenty of options and could choose whomever he wanted. Zack recalls rumors of fleeting relationships before missions. However, normally, Lord Oswald is polite but firm, setting clear boundaries for any woman who tries to get close. Zack realizes he has never seen a woman speak to Oswald so casually before. He acknowledges that while Oswald is skilled at projecting a certain image, he isn't actually the womanizer rumors describe. The scene shifts to a table where the three are seated for tea and food. Oswald, sipping tea, prompts the briefing to continue. Zack details the incident. An elderly couple found a victim early in the morning while out gathering chestnuts. The victim, a resident of the Duchy of Freya, was discovered at the forest entrance 2 days ago. He was sitting on the ground, exhausted and covered in blood. Zack notes there were no eyewitnesses. Cecil interjects, confirming she went to the scene. She explains that the butler, the only one aware of Oswald's location in the mountain cabin, sought her guidance. Since she was familiar with the situation, she went to provide treatment. She found the villager severely injured. She cast a healing spell and prescribed medicine. Due to her low magical energy, she could only offer first aid, but a doctor was called immediately because of the critical condition. The injured man was transported to the royal capital without issue. Cecil modestly admits her lack of high skill as a white mage but emphasizes her ability to use basic healing magic. Oswald turns his attention to Zack, asking what he did during the 3 days. Zack reports that he examined the wounds of the attacked man. He describes a deep mark on the chest, as if the victim had been grabbed by sharp claws. Most likely, the victim was violently pulled backward and thrown to the ground. Zack emphasizes that the wound was far deeper than anything a normal animal could inflict, with severely torn tissues. He concludes this is not normal. Oswald finds it strange that the man survived such an attack. A dark memory surfaces in Oswald's mind. The panel depicts a flashback of a massive, wolf-like beast with jagged claws lunging in the rain. He remembers drawing his sword to defend a subordinate, the beast's claws tearing through the air. The memory aligns with the current description, evoking the trauma of that day. The flashback fades as Oswald feels a hand on his forehead. Cecil leans in close, observing that his temperature seems to be rising slightly. Oswald freezes, his gaze locking onto her features. He notes her lips, red and glossy, and her eyes, the color of amber, a mesmerizing blend of gold and orange that reflects the glow of molten honey. He observes the fragility of her wrist, thinking it might break with just a little pressure. Oswald abruptly pulls back, assuring her he is fine and there is no need to worry. He changes the subject, complimenting her, stating that at the very least, her eyes are beautiful. Cecil, unfazed, retorts that Oswald doesn't know much about the world. She lectures him that marriage between a man and a woman isn't as inevitable as he thinks, and people have different preferences. She declares that for her, love doesn't depend much on a person's gender. Cecil playfully adds that when she marries, she will cover her entire face, leaving only her eyes visible, and wager everything on them. Oswald skeptically remarks that no man would commit to a woman who remains so mysterious. Cecil laughs off his dismissal. Oswald softens, stating that what matters to him is that a partner is kind, noble, and respectful of others' opinions. He describes his ideal as someone who moves forward without straying from their principles. Cecil agrees that if such a person is sociable, capable, and possesses pride, she might wish to live beside them too. Zack interrupts the romantic tension, asking if they have strayed from the main topic. He brings the conversation back to the monster. He proposes a theory: the monster attacked the villagers to determine whether they were suitable as vessels. Oswald asks if Zack believes the monster is searching for a vessel to take over. Zack confirms this, citing similar incidents in the past. Cecil questions how this information leaked to someone outside the circle, given that she wasn't chosen for the monster hunting battle. Oswald explains that the abilities of this magical beast are known only to a select few among the Holy Knights. However, he notes that since Cecil is the white healer treating him, the information couldn't be kept from her. Zack adds that unlike ordinary people, he understands the sensitivity of battle-related information and saw a clear similarity between this incident and past cases. Oswald leans forward, asking Zack to analyze how he received his wounds. Zack explains his deduction. When Oswald saw a soldier being attacked, he stepped in to strike the beast. However, the monster endured the attack. Zack identifies the key ability of the monster as converting dark energy into claws. He suspects the monster possesses other beings, transferring from one vessel to another. It channeled sinister energy into claws to lash out at Oswald. Cecil pieces it together, asking if the monster chose one of the passing villagers as its vessel. Zack agrees, explaining that just as the monster tried to attack Oswald, it realized the chosen villager wasn't suitable and discarded him. This explains why the villager survived. He was a discarded vessel. However, Oswald was able to strike back. Cecil raises a troubling question. Why did the monster try to possess humans in the first place? She points out that Lord Oswald is the commander of the Order and possesses sacred power, giving him high resistance to magic and making possession impossible. Oswald admits they don't know the reason behind this behavior. All they know is that some monsters have started exhibiting this trait. He questions what suddenly drove them to this approach. Zack notes that this is the first time a monster of this specific type has been observed behaving this way. To avoid commotion, he used his authority as vice commander to send a limited number of soldiers to investigate. They are trying to determine if this is an exception or the beginning of a new phenomenon. Oswald confirms he receives periodic reports. Cecil asks if units are already deployed. Zack confirms, worrying that this new monster might have abilities similar to the one that wounded Oswald. He expresses concern about the unknown extent of the effect on Oswald. Oswald then launches into an explanation of the world's lore. He states that all living beings possess a magic core within their bodies. This core contains a certain amount of magical energy. Cecil asks if the monster that injured Oswald was completely eliminated. Oswald confirms he completely destroyed its core. Oswald continues, explaining that unlike other creatures, when a magical beast's core is destroyed, it loses the ability to maintain its form and completely disappears. He elaborates that beings with strong magical energy become sorcerers if human, mythical beasts if animals, and nature spirits if plants. Mythical beasts and spirits usually create their own habitats in other dimensions and do not attack humans. However, sometimes they lose balance, become aggressive, and cross into the human world. These are called magical beasts. The crux of the mystery is revealed. Oswald destroyed the core, but the very next moment, the monster obtained another core and left the area. This impossibility hangs in the air. Cecil asks where it got another core. Oswald admits he wants to understand why they suddenly started using these methods. They need to confirm if it has a magical origin. Cecil wonders how their minds evolved so quickly to develop such an ability. Zack notes that for another similar monster to appear at this exact time suggests they are facing an opponent with sharp intelligence. Cecil observes Oswald closely, remarking that the way he speaks makes it sound like he already knows the real reason behind their sudden awareness. Before Oswald can answer, Cecil abruptly changes the mood. She declares that they should postpone the investigation and that it is finally time to treat his wound. She states she will leave the monsters to Sir Zack while Oswald focuses on recovering. She is visibly excited to show her true skills now that she has him alone. Oswald questions her sudden excitement. Cecil pouts, reminding him he made her wait 3 whole days. Oswald tries to stand, claiming he is completely fine, but immediately stumbles. His vision blurs and he pitches forward. Cecil catches him, noting he can't even stand properly. She holds him up, deciding to start the treatment before he completely collapses. Oswald looks at her with suspicion as she helps him move. He asks what exactly she plans to do to him. Cecil smiles innocently, saying he might feel a little discomfort, nothing more. Oswald, sweating, retorts that just coming from her never really means just in the usual sense. He panics, telling her not to joke with him. In the background, Zack sips his tea, amused. He asks how long the commander will remain unconscious this time after the treatment. Cecil cheerfully answers, just a short period, while Oswald yells, again, and don't joke with me, as he is led away to his medical fate. The chapter ends with the promise of continuation. The confines of the mountain cabin, where the atmosphere shifts from strategic deliberation to the intimacy of medical intervention. Cecil, the white mage, initiates the core phase of her treatment, declaring her intent to begin absorbing the malicious energy that festers within Lord Oswald's wound. She announces the commencement of the full-fledged treatment, with a mixture of professional authority and theatrical flair. Cecil produces a specific magical implement for this procedure, a stone designed to siphon dark energy. She instructs Oswald that he must keep this stone pressed against his chest for 3 continuous hours without letting it drop. Oswald, visibly taken aback by the logistical constraints of the cure, questions the duration, incredulous that he cannot move for such a significant span of time. He stares at the object, demanding to know the specifics of its placement and function. Cecil clarifies that the magic stone absorbs malicious energy directly from the wound site and requires appropriate pressure to function effectively. Consequently, she orders him to remove his clothes to facilitate direct contact. Oswald complies, unbuttoning his shirt to reveal his torso. Cecil, attempting to reassure him, claims that this purification method is a standard technique passed down in the white mage world, urging him to rest assured despite the seemingly rudimentary nature of the stone placement. However, Oswald remains skeptical, muttering that the procedure feels akin to a shady business practice. Cecil defends her methods, insisting that this is actually the fastest route to recovery. As Oswald strips to his waist, the visual reality of his condition becomes undeniable. A jagged, dark scar marks his chest, the curse left by the magical beast. Oswald grimly notes that if the affliction is truly a curse of this magnitude, it does not seem like something that will disappear easily. Cecil observes him closely, her internal senses alerting her to a disturbing phenomenon. She feels a murderous aura radiating from his entire body, a stark contrast to the domestic setting. Cecil's mind races with the implications of the magical beast's nature. She engages Oswald in a theoretical discussion, positing that if a beast transfers its core to a different vessel, it effectively ceases to be the original individual. She grapples with the logic of the encounter, noting that destroying the core should cause the beast to disappear entirely. The fact that the beast managed to obtain a new core conveniently from another country doesn't make sense to her. She stares intently at Oswald's chest, her gaze fixed not just on the physical wound but on the metaphysical shadow obscuring it, a shadow Oswald himself cannot recognize. Oswald, misinterpreting her intense scrutiny, asks if she is staring at his body because she finds it attractive. Flustered, Cecil stammers a confirmation to deflect from her magical analysis. Oswald dryly remarks that in a normal conversation, such a comment would be considered inappropriate. Cecil leans in, her fingers tracing the scar on his chest. She notes the toughness of the tissue. Her hand wanders lower, and she cannot help but comment that, as expected of a knight, his abdominal muscles are incredibly well-defined. She internally questions why she doesn't sense the same aggressiveness from him as she did when they first met, wondering if his improved physical condition has tempered his aura. Suddenly, a sharp sound cuts through the air. Slap. Oswald strikes her hand away. Undeterred, Cecil notes that the evil energy seems to actively avoid her white mage magic power. She pivots the conversation to his training habits, asking if he takes his shirt off during practice, as she observes numerous faint scars on his sunburned skin. She chides him, suggesting it is dangerous to swing a sword while shirtless. Oswald, his patience thinning and his modesty provoked, accuses her of touching him for reasons other than medical treatment. He demands she stop touching him. Cecil, caught in her curiosity, mentally admits guilt but outwardly retorts that if she doesn't touch him, she cannot heal him. Oswald, flustered and shouting, "No," insists she just treat the wound quickly. Cecil, regaining her composure, offers a sarcastic medical solution. If he itches when touched, she can prescribe medicine for skin diseases. She teasingly asks if something touched his face, prompting a glare from the commander. She assures him the stone does not have a diuretic effect and lists no other particular precautions. Cecil then explains the second phase of the setup. From the top of the bed's canopy, she will hang a crystal ball designed to absorb the evil energy radiating from his chest. She informs him that this crystal ball will be replaced every 3 hours, and during that time, he is strictly forbidden from leaving the device. Cecil climbs onto the bed to install the crystal ball above him. In the process, she loses her balance and collapses directly onto Oswald's bare chest. She awkwardly apologizes, telling him not to mind her. However, the proximity reignites her curiosity. She marvels that in all her time using healing magic on men and women, young and old, she has never seen someone with such impressive muscles. Driven by a scholarly impulse, she expresses a desire to touch them more. Oswald tolerates this no longer. In a blur of motion, he reverses their positions, pinning Cecil to the mattress with his body hovering over hers. He looms over her, his expression dark and serious. He addresses her as "young lady" and delivers a stern warning. Even if she is not his type, she must be aware that unless the other person is a perfect gentleman, behavior like this invites an attack. He elaborates that touching the body of the opposite sex in a bedroom and stroking a bare torso is reckless provocation. To emphasize his point, Oswald leans down, his presence overwhelming her. He bites or nips at her, eliciting a cry of pain from Cecil. He whispers that even if she gets violated in this situation, she has no right to complain. Despite the physical threat, Cecil's mind remains analytical. She observes his behavior, theorizing that exhibiting such abnormal aggression might indicate that his resistance to the possession is weakening. She peers into his eyes, looking for telltale signs of corruption, but finds no abnormalities in his pupils. Cecil pushes back, shouting at him to shut up and denying his possession claim, but simultaneously demanding he take back control of his body immediately. She accuses him directly, "You are possessed by a spirit. Can you hear me, Lord Oswald?" Oswald sighs, exasperated. He points out the absurdity of her logic. After all the times he denied possession when she brought it up, she chooses this moment of intimacy to accuse him again. Cecil argues that his actions make no sense otherwise. She reminds him that he previously stated he would never see her as a potential partner, so if his desires have built up to this point, it must be the result of external influence. She asks if his bizarre behavior wasn't proof of possession. Oswald's response is nonverbal and decisive. He lowers his head and captures her lips in a kiss. The sensation overwhelms Cecil. She feels their lips overlapping, noting Oswald's blurry eyes close to hers. Her first thought is medicinal. She wonders if he is feeding her a pill. But the heat of the contact dispels that notion. Her internal romantic fantasies clash with reality. She imagined a first kiss to be softer, fluffier, and heart-throbbing. Instead, Oswald's kiss is stiff and hard. Yet, despite the lack of technique, she finds it undeniably sweet. The kiss deepens, accompanied by the sound of smooching. Cecil, struggling to process the event, attempts to reframe it as a medical necessity, telling herself, "I see. It's artificial respiration." She reasons that if it is just artificial respiration, maybe it is acceptable. But the kiss continues, Oswald's tongue involved, shattering the medical delusion. Cecil wonders why the situation escalated to this point. She senses a deep, underlying emotion in his action. He is kissing her tenderly, as if he is longing for something distant or lost. The kiss concludes, and Oswald pulls away, leaving a dazed Cecil to exhale a sigh. Oswald wipes his mouth, searching for words. He awkwardly states that there is something bitter around her chest area. Cecil, confused and flustered, asks what on earth he was trying to think about her. Oswald retreats into formality, declaring that from now on, he will not touch her carelessly. Cecil analyzes this sudden withdrawal. She realizes that Oswald is capable of kissing someone he doesn't even like without hesitation. She concludes that Lord Oswald is a person whose humanity she cannot help but doubt. This emotional detachment, she surmises, is the reason he is called the Black Faction in the social world. She warns herself that delving too deeply into his dangerous emotions will lead to nothing good. The tension is broken by the magic itself. Cecil notices the crystal ball above the bed is starting to cloud over, indicating it is successfully absorbing energy. She urges him to hurry up and lie down. However, her mind lingers on the kiss. She confronts him, asking if it is possible for him to kiss someone other than her so easily. She points out the contradiction. She was just attacked, yet now he is dismissive. She challenges him, asking what he intends to do to confirm his feelings. Oswald deflects, asking if the stone placement can really be done in 3 hours. Cecil confirms the timeline, instructing him to exchange the wooden crystal in 3 hours. She sarcastically thanks him for the earlier interaction, saying they will find out the truth eventually. The narrative jumps forward in time. The treatment process is arduous. Cecil notes that after the initial setup, there was still work to be done to peel the visible scars of the curse off the source. This extraction process ended up taking half a day. 4 days into the treatment, the scene shifts to Cecil manipulating a magical device. She is exhausted. She explains that if she removes the curse of movement, the spindle she is holding will fall. She states that maintaining this state for 1 hour a day is her physical limit. Oswald lies in bed, watching her work. He remarks that he never thought the task of sitting still with time placed on his brain would continue for days. Cecil winds up the spindle. Oswald asks if the object wrapped around the spindle is the cursed chain. Cecil confirms it is. She explains her plan. She will seal the chain and send it to her master. Oswald, observing her slenderness, wonders aloud what she does with that rod body of hers. Cecil ignores the comment, announcing that the hour is up and praising the completion of the task. Cecil then demonstrates the nature of the curse to Oswald. She asks him to watch carefully. She channels her magical power into the chain wrapped around the spindle. Slowly, the invisible becomes visible. The chain of curses reveals itself to his eyes. Cecil explains that originally, a curse text created by a person cannot be read. However, because this time the curse is magic-based, it can be deciphered. She sent it to her master for analysis. Now that they can read the curse, they can perform a counterspell to break it, and potentially track down the person who cursed him to reason with them. Oswald remarks that she sounds cheerful about it, thanking her regardless. He acknowledges that the curse has still spread quite deeply inside him. He feels a sudden thump in his chest, realizing the gravity of a curse being physically on his body. Cecil sighs, frustrated by his stoicism. She asks if he lacks the sensitivity to feel anxiety. She lectures him that rather than simply acknowledging his anxiety, he should accept that his condition will gradually improve. She bluntly tells him that he doesn't need to worry for the sake of others, and asks if he possesses the ability to empathize with people who are feeling anxious for him. A few days pass, marked by a strange but peaceful domesticity between the two. In a reversal of the bedroom scene, Oswald tries to pat Cecil's head, offering her comfort. Cecil recoils violently, shouting, "Don't touch me." Oswald tries to comfort her, saying it must have been tough but it's okay now. Cecil snaps back, telling him not to talk about people as if they are blood or humans. She questions if he thinks it's enough to just empathize with her feelings. Despite the recent intense treatment, Oswald is back on his feet and training with his sword. Cecil approaches him, noting he is doing something reckless again. Oswald admits he can't swing the sword as well as he thought. He wonders if it is a lack of stamina or if his body is just dull. Cecil watches him, reflecting on his character. She realizes that spending a few days together has disproven the rumors. He is not frivolous or infatuated. Instead, he is more serious and strict than anyone else, constantly handling his duties as the head of the knights and as a duke despite being drained by the curse. She internally expresses a deep desire for him to just take it easy and rest. The scene transitions to the kitchen, where Oswald attempts to help with chores. He clumsily handles a knife, prompting a sharp oops. Cecil scolds him, asking if he can't at least show some manners or be polite. She asks if her previous comment was too mean. Cecil takes charge, announcing she will make grilled dishes, soup, and stew. She explains she bought high-quality pork specifically to help with his recovery. Oswald, looking at the ingredients, dismissively asks if cooking isn't just cutting everything up, grilling, and boiling it. Cecil dryly agrees that one could say that. Oswald, displaying a mix of ignorance and arrogance, comments that he's sure the food will be good. He makes a snide remark that she probably learned to cook well because she was served good food at her lover's or mistress's house. He specifically mentions Aurora-style sauce. Cecil is annoyed, realizing he is projecting his own lifestyle, imagining eating at a lover's or wife's house, onto her. Oswald then makes a specific request. He asks her to make something he has never eaten before. He apologizes but asks her to make his portion too. Cecil retorts that she is already making it, and if he doesn't like it, he can do it himself. Oswald admits his body is sluggish and he has no stamina, playing the invalid card. Cecil finds his behavior annoying in its own way but decides to keep her thoughts to herself. She agrees to cook, resigning herself to just grilling and boiling as he suggested. She warns him not to complain about the food. As she prepares the pork, Oswald returns to the philosophical topic of anxiety. He admits that carrying complicated feelings is dangerous for him. He states somberly that for him, such emotional burdens could be fatal. Cecil, focusing on the food, admits to herself that she is definitely not good at dealing with that kind of emotional weight. The chapter concludes with the simmering tension of unspoken burdens and the aroma of a recovery meal. A quiet intimacy fills the dining room where Duke Oswald and Cecil share a meal, the silence broken only by the soft, rhythmic sounds of cutlery against porcelain. The dish before them is a roasted pork soup, slow-cooked to a tender perfection, yet Cecil consumes it with a fervor that puffs her cheeks, her focus entirely devoted to the simple act of nourishment. Oswald sits opposite her, his posture rigid and refined, watching her eat with a gaze that is both intense and unreadable, noting the way she devours the meal without a hint of the pretension usually found in high society. The domestic scene stands in stark contrast to the magical and political turmoil that usually surrounds them, grounding them in the immediacy of the dinner table. Oswald breaks the silence, his voice low as he addresses the woman across from him, sensing a drift in her thoughts. Cecil, misunderstanding his intent, assumes he requires a condiment and helpfully points out that the salt is located in the center of the table, inviting him to use it as he pleases. Oswald corrects her immediately, clarifying that his inquiry was not about seasoning but rather about the thoughts visibly occupying her mind. Cecil pauses, her spoon hovering, and admits that the atmosphere gives her a strange sense of comfort and peace, a tranquility she does not usually find. She reflects on the novelty of having a quiet dinner away from the bustling palace, noting that usually, the environment is far more chaotic. She explains that her mother and sister often visit from the annex, creating a lively environment, whereas Oswald usually dines alone in his study or amidst the formalities of the dining hall during official occasions. Oswald listens, his internal monologue revealing a complex analysis of the woman before him. He observes her small frame, noting how even a girl of her slight stature possesses a presence that fills the room. He compares this simple life during his convalescence to the lavish, sterile banquets of the palace, finding the current simplicity incomparable in its own way. His eyes trace her lips, which he notes never seem to stop moving either with food or conversation, and her curious eyes that occasionally gleam with a hint of suspicion. There is a unique, lively noisiness about her that fascinates him. Even when she is merely eating, he feels as though unseen sounds buzz around them, vibrating with her energy. He acknowledges to himself that she is completely different from any woman he has interacted with before. The chewing sounds she makes, mokyu, are unrefined, yet they contribute to the organic reality of the moment. When Cecil catches his stare and defensive remarks, Oswald clarifies that he never claimed to be annoyed, merely observant. Yet, he admits internally that she is not the type he is usually drawn to. He is accustomed to dignity and majestic elegance, not this kind of simple, unpolished beauty. From any objective perspective, she is not his type, a fact he reiterates to himself with certainty. The atmosphere shifts as Cecil leans in, her gaze piercing through the casual dining setting. She questions his stare, and Oswald nearly voices a backhanded compliment about her type having its own charm, realizing that he does not feel disappointed when comparing her to the high-born ladies he usually courts. However, the conversation takes a sharp turn when Cecil bluntly asks if he can truly manage his affairs as a duke with such sensitivity, expressing a mocking concern for his capabilities. Oswald, frustrated by her insolence, retorts that he was not praising her, to which Cecil jokingly claims to be honored by his compliment. The banter escalates until Oswald, exasperated by the cyclical nature of their discussions, demands to know what she really thinks of him, wondering why their conversations always spiral into these confrontations. Oswald's mind flashes back to a moment of intimacy, a memory of a kiss shared between them. He rationalizes the act, telling himself that he kissed her to make her realize the importance of being cautious, to instill a sense of danger in her. Yet, looking at her now, he realizes that the lesson did not take root. He leans forward, his expression darkening with a mix of warning and incredulity, asking if she feels no concern at all given that they are alone in the house, just a man and a woman. Cecil remains unfazed, continuing to eat as she dismantles his attempt at intimidation. She reminds him of his own words, that he has no need to get close to her because he is already completely satisfied, implying that she has no reason to worry if his lack of interest is genuine. Oswald is left momentarily speechless by her logic. She continues, casually stating that it is unfortunate for him, but before he could even think about attacking her, she would have already caught him, leaving him no chance of success. Her confidence borders on arrogance, marked by a smug smile that radiates triumph. Oswald, stung by her dismissal, asks if she is so sure simply because she is not his type. Cecil agrees, but then flips the script entirely. She suggests that the real concern should be whether she might be the one to attack him. She posits a scenario where she approached him with the intention of pressuring him into marriage, leveraging his reputation in high society regarding relationships against him. Oswald is flabbergasted, sputtering at the absurdity of the idea that she would be the aggressor. Cecil immediately backtracks, her demeanor shifting from teasing to pragmatic. She claims she would immediately return to her village if things went that way, dismissing the idea. Oswald, recovering his composure, admits that what she says isn't technically wrong. Even if they are together, nothing is likely to happen because he considers her entirely out of his realm of interest. He agrees that the risk is too great for a man like him to attack her, validating her assessment. Cecil grumbles over her food, sensing the insult in his agreement. However, Oswald's gaze sharpens as he decides to test her confidence further. He acknowledges that while she is not his type and he wouldn't typically think of getting close to her, the situation could change. He posits a hypothetical. What if, despite the breach of contract, he suddenly entertained the idea of making her a fleeting amusement for a single night? Cecil slams her hands on the table, demanding to know why he always takes things in such a sordid direction. She immediately begins drafting a sensationalist newspaper headline in her mind. Did his desires get the best of him? The handsome Duke attacks a short girl with no charm. She threatens him with the visualization of this scandal, asking if he would like to see the headline, "The handsome Duke falls from grace," plastered across society papers. She asserts that not only would he fail to break the curse, but he would also face a massive scandal that she would personally expose. Oswald leans back, unfazed by her threats, and reveals his true deduction. He observes that her reaction confirms she trusts him. He points out that she doesn't seem to view him as a man controlled by his desires, implying that her lack of fear stems from a deep-seated belief in his self-control. Cecil stammers, caught off guard, trying to deny the implication that she trusts him implicitly. She tries to regain the upper hand, asking if he didn't feel anything when he kissed her, suggesting that perhaps he is capable of sleeping with a woman he has no feelings for. Oswald counters, questioning her logic. He asks if she truly thinks he would attack her, or if she is projecting her own thoughts. He presses her, asking if she doesn't see him as a man at all, even after their kiss. Cecil deflects, stating that in any case, there is no need to worry because the chances of anything happening are incredibly low. She rationalizes that for a man like Lord Oswald, a kiss is no different from a lick from a dog or a cat, carrying no provocative weight. Therefore, she concludes, she has nothing to fear. Oswald looks at her with a mix of exasperation and disbelief, stunned that she would equate his kiss to an animal's lick. He mutters that the danger is on her, not the other way around, hinting at the restraint he is exercising. Cecil, oblivious to the nuance, retorts that if he is so worried he can simply lock his bedroom door to prevent her from breaking in, reversing the role of the aggressor again. The banter is abruptly cut short by the arrival of grim news. A report comes in that the village has been attacked by monsters again, and knights have been injured, with one in critical condition. The atmosphere instantly shifts from domestic teasing to urgent crisis. Cecil immediately switches into her role as a healer, declaring she will head over to provide first aid. The scene shifts to the forest, where the aftermath of the attack is visible. Cecil and Oswald arrive, teleporting to the site to save time. Cecil, despite calling herself a failed white witch, can palpably feel the dark aura filling the place. She worries about Oswald's safety, questioning if it is wise for him to be there given his own cursed condition. She wonders if the monster that attacked the village is the same one that wounded Oswald. The overwhelming scent of blood and death makes it difficult for her to isolate the specific magical signature. She notes that Oswald insisted on coming, unable to leave the fate of his knights solely in their hands, despite the fact that his curse is a secret and he should be resting. She acknowledges his leadership but fears the consequences. They approach the injured knights. Cecil focuses on a knight from the First Division who is in critical condition. She observes the wounds. They are black, festering with a sinister energy that she recognizes. She realizes with horror that the wounds bear the same dark transformation as Oswald's, implying the same monster or a similar dark force is responsible. She questions if there has been a strange change in the nature of the attacks. Cecil issues orders, stating the knight must be transported to Master Curtis's estate immediately as her current healing abilities are insufficient for such deep-rooted darkness, and violent movement could reopen the wounds. She administers first aid but knows it is a stopgap measure. As the injured are moved, Cecil turns her attention to Oswald, who is standing dangerously close to the source of the corruption. She warns him, her voice laced with panic, not to startle her, but more importantly, that the dark energy might react with him even if he feels fine at the moment. She urges him to step back. Suddenly, the black, viscous energy from the knight's wounds reacts violently. It lashes out, not dissipating but seeking a host. Cecil realizes with terror that the energy is trying to absorb the darkness she was attempting to remove, and it is drawn to Oswald. The dark mass surges toward him, striking him. Oswald collapses as the dark energy integrates into his body. Cecil screams, realizing his body is succumbing to the resonance between his curse and the external darkness. She knows immediately that standard medicine and tools will be useless in this situation. There is no time to hesitate. Cecil makes a split-second decision. She recalls her unique ability. She is a being with a unique magical energy that allows her to absorb and analyze harmful elements in the body, such as curses and toxins. This ability works through direct contact, allowing her to analyze and absorb the affliction instantly. However, she knows the risks. The more complex and deeply rooted the source, the more dangerous it is for her to interact with it, as it forces a deep connection. She realizes the dark energy that was seeping from the knight has returned to its master, Lord Oswald. The resonance has stopped, but the darkness is now inside him, strengthening the existing curse. She understands that the method she has used so far, likely superficial healing, won't resolve the issue at its core because the roots of darkness run deeper than expected. Determined to save him, Cecil initiates the treatment. It is an intimate act, requiring her to press her lips to his to create the necessary conduit for the magical transfer. She lowers herself onto him, engaging the purification ritual. The sensation is overwhelming. She feels the world around her fading until nothing is left but Lord Oswald. It is an all-consuming experience, dragging her into a sea of sensation that she feels she should never dive into. Oswald begins to regain consciousness during the procedure. He feels the contact, the transfer of energy, and the physical intimacy. He is confused, his mind still hazy, struggling to distinguish between the medical necessity and the emotional weight of the act. As the ritual concludes, Oswald wakes fully, pulling back to look at Cecil with intense scrutiny. He demands to know with what intent she performed that action. He warns her that when one takes actions that are difficult to distinguish from those driven by emotion, one must be extremely careful. Cecil, flustered and breathless, insists that it was purely a means to save him. She calls it treatment. Oswald touches his forehead, skeptical, asking if she really calls that treatment. He questions which part exactly was medical, implying the physical sensation felt far too personal. Cecil maintains that technically speaking, all of it was necessary for the purification ritual to restore him to his original state. She explains hurriedly that she had never tried it on anyone else before. This was the first time. She bets that he only recalls bits and pieces, hoping his memory is fragmented. She explains that he lost consciousness because of the dark energy emitted by the knight, which resonated with the energy inside him, becoming incredibly strong. She had no choice but to resort to this intense method. Oswald narrows his eyes, seizing on her admission. He asks for confirmation. Was he really the first person she ever used this method on? Cecil confirms it, stammering that his condition was critical. Oswald seems to find some satisfaction or deep significance in this fact, murmuring, "I see." The intensity of the moment is broken by the sound of footsteps and a door unlocking. Cecil, realizing the compromising position and the emotional overload, tries to retreat. She wobbles, her legs weak from the magical expenditure. Oswald catches her arm to steady her, but she insists she can handle it herself. A voice interrupts them, Curtis or perhaps another ally, asking if they are okay and noting the door was locked. The intruder remarks that if Cecil had tripped and hurt herself during the treatment, it would have been a problem, oblivious to the heavy tension in the room. Cecil panics, shouting that it's not what they think, desperate to dispel any romantic misunderstanding. Oswald looks at her, exasperated by her frantic denial, wondering how she can focus on appearances in such a situation. The intruder, sensing the thick atmosphere and perhaps seeing the flushed faces, awkwardly asks, "Should I leave?" realizing they may have interrupted something far more complex than simple medical aid. Time drifts quietly in the secluded estate, the days bleeding into one another with a domestic tranquility that belies the magical volatility simmering beneath the surface. Cecil stands at the kitchen counter, the rhythmic chop-chop of her knife filling the silence as she prepares fresh fish, brought inland by a traveling merchant using ice magic to preserve the catch. She focuses intently on the task, planning to sauté the seafood, yet her attention fractures, pulled magnetically toward the man occupying the room with her. Oswald watches her, his gaze heavy and unblinking, tracking her movements with a predatory focus that unsettles the air between them. Cecil feels the weight of his stare, a physical sensation that pricks at her skin, forcing her to acknowledge that something fundamental has shifted in the atmosphere since the night of the treatment. She attempts to rationalize this change, attributing it to her own imagination or perhaps the lingering effects of the magical resonance, but the undeniable tension suggests otherwise. Oswald's presence looms large. He is a man whose reputation as a ladies' man precedes him, a figure who keeps the gossip magazines in the capital busy with tales of his conquests. Cecil reminds herself of this, trying to build a fortress of indifference around her heart, but his proximity dismantles her defenses. He moves closer, invading her personal space until the scent of him, a unique aroma distinct from the soap they both use, fills her senses. He leans in, his face inches from hers, and observes with a dry, teasing tone that her face has turned red. Cecil recoils, flustered, demanding to know what is wrong, to which Oswald replies with maddening vagueness that it was merely casual conversation. He lingers, refusing to walk away, his eyes scanning her reactions as if gathering data. He playfully suggests that perhaps her flushed state is due to the cookies she gave him earlier, or perhaps, his voice drops, it is because of the kiss they shared. Internally, Cecil panics, recognizing this emotional turbulence as a catastrophic threat to her professional duty. She retreats into a mental analysis of her own abilities to ground herself. Her power, the ability to absorb and purify malice, poison, and curses by touching another person, relies on a precarious emotional balance. She knows that if strong feelings, specifically romantic love, cloud her judgment, the efficacy of her magic degrades. Emotional attachment makes the absorption of another's pain unbearable. To function as a healer, she must maintain a sterile distance. To save Lord Oswald, to truly purify the deep-rooted evil energy festering within him, she deduces that she must utilize her final, most drastic measure, which paradoxically requires intimacy without attachment. Therefore, the one thing she must avoid at all costs is developing romantic feelings for her patient. Oswald, however, operates on a different frequency. He retreats to the solitude of the corridor, his hand covering his mouth as he grapples with the realization that he has been teasing Cecil whenever the opportunity arises. He reflects on their time at the clinic, remembering how he initially found her annoying, a chaotic element that dragged him into her messes. But that irritation has transmuted into affection. He now finds her smallest movements, the way she eats, the way she works, undeniably cute. His eyes follow her unconsciously, drawn to her warmth. A dull ache manifests low in his gut, a physical symptom of his growing desire. He recalls the moment of the treatment vividly, Cecil looking relieved, smiling softly with deep orange eyes that held a warmth he had never encountered before. The memory of her lips on his scars, the sensation of her tongue brushing against his skin to draw out the poison, burns in his mind. Since that moment of intimacy, his restraint has crumbled, leaving him unable to hold back his attraction. Later, in the sunlit garden, Oswald sits with his vice commander, a man with light hair and a teasing demeanor who notices his superior's agitation. The vice commander, observing Oswald's healed body, suggests they return to the capital for a while, insinuating that Oswald is pent up from abstinence. He casually recommends that once they return, Oswald can easily find a lover or revisit an old flame to relieve his frustration. Oswald bristles at the suggestion, his mind instantly rejecting the idea of a casual encounter. He realizes with a jolt that he is no longer attracted to the hollow game of choosing a partner from a pile of social invitations. The prospect of meaningless physical relations holds no appeal. He craves the meaningful, deep exchanges he has found with Cecil. The vice commander, catching on to Oswald's hesitation, whistles in amusement, deducing that there is a specific girl responsible for this change in behavior. He warns Oswald that if he plans to treat this new girl the same way he treated his past conquests, with a no-strings-attached casualness, he should reconsider. He rightly points out that Cecil is not the type of woman who can enjoy or survive a purely physical relationship. She deserves to be treated properly. Oswald, staring at the ground, concedes the point, admitting he knows she is not an option for a fling. His mind drifts to a radical possibility, making her a duchess. He muses that the idea might not be bad, signifying a complete shift in his intentions from temporary amusement to permanent commitment. Suddenly, Cecil appears in the distance, interrupting their conversation. She approaches with a stern expression, having overheard enough to misunderstand the context. She lectures Oswald, stating that if he is not completely healed, there could be negative effects on anyone he engages with physically, interpreting his conversation about frustration as a medical risk. She urges him to endure his frustration a little longer. Oswald tries to interject, but Cecil cuts him off, her voice trembling slightly as she declares that she holds no hard feelings. She asserts that she considers everything that happened between them as just treatment, and fully understands that she is not an option for him, parroting the words she heard him say to the vice commander but twisting their meaning to reaffirm her own unworthiness. Cecil turns on her heel and marches away, desperate to escape before her composure cracks. Oswald, realizing the gravity of the misunderstanding, sprints after her, shouting her name. He catches up to her near the estate's perimeter, breathless, desperate to explain that when he said she was not an option, he meant she was not an option for a casual fling, implying she was an option for something much more serious. Before he can bridge the emotional distance, a crackling sound tears through the air. A wolf-like beast emerges from the foliage, its presence heralding a sudden spike in magical energy. This is no ordinary animal. Its eyes lack the mindless savagery of a typical monster, possessing instead a focused, intelligent gleam. The beast carries a glowing orb in its jaws, which it spits out onto the ground with a wet thud before turning to flee. Oswald, instinctively reaching for his sword, prepares to chase the creature or examine the object, but Cecil screams at him to stop. She recognizes the volatile nature of the magic pulsing from the orb and warns him that he, being unfamiliar with such artifacts, must keep his distance. Cecil steps forward, her hands glowing as she initiates a purification circle around the broken remnants of the orb. The magic flares, burning away the dark, evil energy clinging to the object. As the light fades, revealing the shattered glass, Oswald looks at her with concern, but Cecil smiles brightly, a professional mask, and thanks him for his concern, assuring him she is fine. She examines the fragments and identifies the object as a messenger orb, a communication tool used by mages to seal words or messages inside, which are then released by the receiver. She reveals she used one recently to contact the White Mage Village to send a report to her master. She explains that the orb functions similarly to her own medical ability, absorbing specific elements to carry information. However, this specific orb has been intercepted. Cecil deduces that someone was watching, intercepted the message, and infected it with evil energy. Cecil posits a theory: the attack was likely aimed at Oswald. She speculates that someone saw the message, corrupted it, and planned to trace the corrupted energy back to its source, Oswald. She paints a vivid, melodramatic picture of a former lover of Oswald's, consumed by vengeance and resentment over his change of heart, turning to forbidden dark magic to track him down. She imagines this scorned woman crying out, "That's an orb heading for Lord Oswald. If I corrupt it, I can track him down." Oswald stares at her, unimpressed, and points out the gaping hole in her logic. It is highly unlikely that anyone could visually link a flying orb specifically to him from a distance. He dismisses her theory that a jealous ex is behind a high-level magical interception. The realization hits Cecil that the interception prevents her from receiving the analysis she requested from her master regarding the residual malice in Oswald's wounds. She falls silent, her face pale as the gravity of their isolation sets in. Oswald, mistaking her silence for illness, steps in close and presses his forehead against hers to check her temperature. Cecil flinches, her heart rate spiking at the sudden intimacy. She stammers, demanding to know why he didn't just use his palm, but Oswald insists he is merely checking for a fever and orders her to stay still. He notes that she is warm, to which Cecil yells that she is only warm because he keeps touching her in such an inappropriate way. The argument dissolves into a charged silence as the proximity overwhelms them both. The tension snaps, and the check transforms into a passionate embrace. Oswald kisses her, the sound of chew and smack filling the quiet clearing as he deepens the contact, his tongue brushing against her in a mirror of the treatment she performed on him, but this time driven by raw, unadulterated desire. Cecil melts into the kiss, her protests dying in her throat, her earlier resolve to avoid romantic feelings crumbling under his touch. When they finally break apart, Oswald, breathless, returns to the conversation as if trying to anchor himself. He explains that the wolf got away, meaning the enemy knows their location or at least that the interception occurred. He then pivots back to the personal, looking Cecil in the eye to clarify his earlier statement. He tells her firmly that he didn't mean she wasn't suitable. She misunderstood his comment about her not being an option. He leaves the implication hanging, that she is the only option, but Cecil is too flustered to process it fully. Cecil realizes that because the orb was destroyed by the wolf, or the entity controlling it, the evil energy she sent out, or that was contained in the orb, didn't reveal Oswald's location to the enemy as intended by the interceptor. The tracking plan failed because the vessel broke. However, this means Curtis, back at the capital, will likely reinforce his defenses, making it harder for them to gather intelligence. The narrative perspective shifts abruptly to a dark, cavernous location where a sinister figure lurks. This entity, shrouding herself in a cloak, reveals a terrifying history. Years ago, a young mage couple visited a legendary sealing place seeking fame. The entity, identifying herself as the Witch of Orthensia, seized the opportunity to take over the body of their unborn child. This possession allowed her to slowly regain her power over the years. She reveals a deep-seated hatred for Oswald, specifically because he is a descendant of Duke Freya, the ancestor who originally sealed her away. The witch laments that her power is still incomplete. Even after orchestrating 3 separate monster invasions to wear down the human defenses, she only managed limited control over the creatures. It is not enough to eliminate the noble bloodline she despises. She vows revenge, promising to find the descendant of the cursed woman who sealed her. The scene shows the possessed vessel, a woman, collapsing or struggling with the overwhelming dark energy residing within her. In the final moments of the chapter, the woman, now appearing composed and disguised as a traveler or perhaps a noble, prepares to leave her hideout. An associate asks why she is heading out when she just returned. The woman replies with a chilling calmness that she needs to make a quick trip to the capital. She predicts that a powerful magical beast is about to appear, claiming she saw terrifying vision. Her eyes gleam with malicious intent as she sets her sights on the capital, signaling that the true threat is about to reveal itself and descend upon Oswald and Cecil. A dimly lit chamber where Cecile Rosewood stands amidst the quiet tension of impending destiny. She gazes downward, her expression obscured by the shadows of her bangs, as her hand hovers over a sealed glass vial sitting upon the wooden table. The room is still, the silence broken only by the soft kodo sound of the stopper being removed, a noise that reverberates like a gavel strike signaling that the time for deliberation has expired. Cecile acknowledges the grim reality that time has run out. Her mind violently recoils into a recent memory, a flashback depicting a monstrous wolf emerging in broad daylight to tear a messenger apart, a creature wreathed in a sinister aura that had been hunting for Lord Oswald. The violence of that memory solidifies her resolve. She grips a quill pen, the metal tip gleaming, and determines that Lord Oswald must be fully prepared to face the threats lurking in the shadows, acknowledging that while many mysteries remain, his survival is paramount. She retreats to the edge of her bed, sitting with her legs crossed as she buries her face in her hand, her body curving inward under the weight of her mission. She whispers to the empty room that if she fails now, nothing else matters, defining her existence by a single, clarity-forged objective. She must break the curse and purge the poison festering in his wounds. To survive the emotional toll of what she is about to do, she erects a mental fortification, telling herself that she must abandon all useless hope. She repeats a mantra of detachment, forcefully convincing herself that everything will be fine as long as she remembers one cruel truth: Lord Oswald means nothing to her. She carves these words into her heart like an inscription on stone, a defensive measure to ensure she can perform her duty without the interference of sentiment. She gazes out the window at the night, her eyes hardening with the certainty that Lord Oswald will never love her, a realization that paradoxically frees her to act. The scene shifts to the main quarters, where Lord Oswald stands buttoning his shirt, looking perplexed as Cecile announces the commencement of treatment. She turns her back to him, stating her intention to prepare a bath, her voice devoid of its usual warmth. Oswald, startled by the sudden directive, questions the necessity of this procedure, noting that his condition has been stable recently and asking if something remains undone. He scrutinizes her, pointing out her unusual silence and the intensity of her stare, sensing an anomaly in her behavior. Cecile turns back, her expression unyielding, and explains that the incident with the wolf revealed that superficial treatments are no longer sufficient. They must uproot the problem at its source. She delivers the mandate that confuses him most. He must bathe, and she implies her presence is required. Oswald recoils, his hand pausing on a pitcher of water, questioning why the healer must bathe alongside the patient. Cecile maintains her clinical mask, asserting that a thorough cleansing of the body is beneficial, framing the intimacy as a medical necessity. Cecile stands alone in the preparation area, consuming a meal that tastes like ash in her mouth. She reflects on the mechanics of her power. Previously, absorbing negative energy through a kiss required her body to burn massive amounts of energy to neutralize it, resulting in a voracious appetite. However, the treatment she prepares for tonight exists on a completely different level, a terrifying unknown that makes her fingers stiff and unresponsive. She stares at the water filling the tub, the steam rising around her, and attempts to rationalize the coming act. She tells herself it is merely allowing something slightly foreign into her body, nothing more and nothing less. She compares herself to Oswald's previous lovers, those delicate women who endured his embrace, and chastises herself that if they could withstand it, she, the strong one, has no excuse to falter. She lowers herself into the water, the ripples distorting her reflection as she chants internally that this is just a medical procedure. Yet, the lie tastes bitter. She acknowledges that such intimacy is the domain of lovers who share affection, not a mage and her liege. She submerges to her chin, admitting that she should have used perfumes or oils to construct a facade of romance, but now only the scent of clinical necessity remains. She steels herself, noting that the medicine she purchased from the master is beginning to take effect within Oswald's system. Cecile enters the bedroom, clad in a hooded robe, her eyes scanning the room to find Oswald lying on the bed, his arms resting behind his head in a posture of relaxed, unsuspecting trust. He greets her, acknowledging she has come for the treatment. Cecile climbs onto the bed, her movements deliberate and predatory, causing Oswald to look up in sudden alarm. He demands to know what is happening as she looms over him, the mattress dipping under her weight. Cecile, her face flushed but determined, reveals the first layer of her deception. She has administered a sedative because the treatment places a heavy psychological burden on both of them. Oswald's eyes widen in shock, his composure cracking as he realizes his autonomy has been compromised. Cecile informs him that he will soon lose the ability to move, her words hanging in the air like a sentence. Oswald struggles against the lethargy spreading through his limbs, demanding to know what she has done to him. Cecile straddles his waist, her robe falling away to reveal a sheer negligee, and confirms that he received a dose. She admits that this extreme measure is the limit of her capability. As Oswald stares up at her, processing the situation, Cecile clarifies the nature of the drug. It is an aphrodisiac of potent efficacy. She explains that it effectively bypasses the will, capable of making one desire even their worst enemy without resistance. She details the biological mechanism. Once his pleasure reaches a critical threshold, the drug triggers a second phase, creating a metaphysical bridge. By taking him inside her, she will absorb the curse and dark energy directly from his body, using her own magical reserves to neutralize and break it down. She apologizes, tears glistening in her eyes, as she declares this sexual union the last and most effective method to save him. Oswald stammers, the crude reality of her words hitting him. The solution is sex. Oswald shouts, calling her a fool and demanding she stop this madness, but his body refuses to obey his command to flee. Cecile leans forward, her hair cascading down, and sanitizes the act by calling it a physical union, asking him to simply endure it for a short while. She places a hand on his chest, acknowledging the potential humiliation he feels at being touched by a woman he does not desire. She intercepts his protest, clarifying that he must not misunderstand. This is not the romantic expression of lovers, but a medical procedure born of necessity. She frames it as a transaction, a mutual sacrifice where she too pays a price, hoping to equalize the degradation. Oswald grits his teeth, sweat beading on his forehead, and retorts that the label does not change the reality of the act. Oswald attempts to invoke his honor, declaring that if he were to embrace a virgin, it would be none other than his lawful wife, the future duchess of his family. Cecile cuts off this moral escape route, revealing the drug's secondary property, memory erasure. She assures him that by morning every trace of tonight's events will be wiped from his mind. Oswald glares at her, his face a mixture of arousal and fury, calling her absolutely infuriating for stripping him of his choice and his memory. Cecile weeps openly now, her facade crumbling as she apologizes to him, knowing she is violating his will. She confesses she had no other choice. She accepts that she is not the one he desires, but begs him to hold her just for this one night, knowing that tomorrow he will forget everything. She pleads for his embrace, a stolen comfort before the oblivion of the morning. The narrative dissolves into the sensory chaos of the act itself. Cecile and Oswald engage in the intimacy she orchestrated, the room filled with the sounds of breath and the friction of skin. Cecile cries out his name, her body arching as the drug and the physical connection take hold. Oswald, despite his verbal protests, succumbs to the chemical and physical drive, his resistance melting into participation. He kisses her, and the line between coercion and passion blurs in the heat of the moment. In the throes of their union, Cecile's internal monologue reveals a deeper secret. The memory is not destroyed but sealed, retrievable only by a specific antidote known as the twin red vial. She vows to carry this burden alone, finding solace in the fact that he will feel no guilt because the memory will vanish. She looks down at him, whispering that it is okay, trying to soothe the conflict visible in his eyes. Oswald, fighting the haze of the aphrodisiac, notices the distress on her face. He curses softly, observing that she looks as if she is about to cry, and asks why she is doing this to herself. Cecile realizes that Oswald is fighting the overwhelming effects of the drug solely to maintain consciousness for her sake. He endures the physical intensity to ask if she is scared, his innate kindness piercing through the artificial circumstances. This realization washes over Cecile. His concern proves that in this isolated moment, she is the only thing reflected in his eyes. That singular focus is enough for her. She surrenders completely to the moment, silently demanding that he love her with everything he has, confident she can endure whatever intensity follows. The climax approaches, shattering language into fragments of sensation. Oswald gasps that he cannot stop, his control fully ceded to the drug and the moment. Cecile urges him on, stating she will not stop either. The physical rhythm accelerates, bodies pressing together in a desperate, fluid motion. Oswald warns her he can no longer hold back, apologizing even as he reaches his limit. Cecile accepts this, her eyes losing focus as the wave takes them both. In the aftermath, as the intensity crests and breaks, Cecile feels a profound metaphysical shift. She perceives that they are becoming one, a fusion of bodies and perhaps something deeper. She lies against him, feeling the heavy thud of his heartbeat, a rhythm that now syncs with her own. She feels completely whole, merged with his warmth, the act completing a circuit within her that she hadn't realized was broken. As she drifts in the post-coital silence, she marks this in her heart as her first night, a memory she will keep forever, even if he cannot. Dawn broke over the secluded cabin, the morning light filtering through the rain-streaked windows to illuminate the aftermath of a night shrouded in secrecy and sacrifice. Outside, the relentless downpour hammered against the glass, washing over the world in gray, while inside, a profound silence reigned. Lord Oswald lay in a deep, restorative slumber, his chest rising and falling with a rhythm that spoke of a peace he had not known in a long time. Watching over him, Cecile observed the tranquility of his repose, noting that the potion crafted by her master had possessed an incredibly potent effect, plunging him into a state of unconsciousness so absolute that it was likely he retained no memory of the previous night's events. Cecile reflected on the dual nature of the elixir she had administered. It was not merely a tool designed to erase memories, but a substance imbued with a powerful stimulating effect intended to facilitate the transfer that had occurred. Yet, despite the potion's influence, Oswald had not succumbed to baser instincts. Instead of giving in to the artificial drive, he had restrained his desire with an iron will, demonstrating a profound consideration for her inexperienced state. The realization brought a complex mix of emotions to Cecile, for while his restraint was noble, it left her suffering from an unnecessary emotional exhaustion, a reaction to the intensity of the unfulfilled tension and the gravity of what she had done. She resigned herself to the fact that this would be the last time she would ever see him in such a vulnerable, intimate state. Deciding to frame the memory as a good wedding night, in her own mind, she determined that she must return to her usual detached life before he awoke, beginning with the necessity of a bath to cleanse herself of the night's remnants. Alone in the privacy of another room, Cecile examined the physical toll of her sorcery. The black scars that had once marred Lord Oswald's body, the physical manifestation of the magical beast's curse, had vanished from his skin only to reappear on hers. They manifested now as red bruises, mirroring the exact locations where the toxins had festered within him. She understood the mechanics of this transfer intimately. Her ability allowed her to absorb and purify toxins. In the past, this process had always worked within the safe limits of healing through simple touch, allowing her to draw out the evil lurking within a patient gradually. However, the previous night had required a method far more drastic. To save him, she had embraced him on a much deeper level, bypassing the slow filtration of hands to absorb the entirety of the corruption directly into her own being. The traces of the curse had transferred to her completely, sparing Lord Oswald the burden he had carried for so long. Cecile inspected the angry red marks, calculating that if she could dismantle the evil structure of the toxins, the bruises would eventually fade. However, the immediate danger lay in discovery. If Lord Oswald were to see the marks on her skin, he would undoubtedly be shocked and consumed by unnecessary worry, correctly deducing that his recovery had come at the cost of her own well-being. To prevent this guilt from taking root in him, she resolved to hide every trace of the transaction. She would face him with a mask of normalcy, as if nothing extraordinary had occurred, ensuring he felt no burden upon waking. This deception was necessary, she reasoned, at least until she could find someone who truly deserved to stand by his side. With a solemn vow, she promised herself that she would never use this ability on anyone else. The burden of such a transfer was far too heavy for her to bear again. She would keep only the memory of his touch, locking away the reality of the pain she now harbored. The immediate physical consequence of such a massive expenditure of magical energy was a ravenous, insatiable hunger. Cecile sat at the table, surrounded by empty plates, devouring food with a ferocity that belied her small stature. She had known that analyzing and neutralizing the absorbed evil would consume a great deal of energy, but the reality was staggering. She had decimated 3 days' worth of provisions in a mere 2 hours. Staring at the empty bowls, she realized she had no choice but to venture out into the rain to replenish their supplies, a complication she had not anticipated. Meanwhile, in the bedroom, consciousness returned to Lord Oswald. He awoke wondering if morning had already arrived, expecting the usual onslaught of illness that defined his mornings. Instead, he found a miraculous absence of symptoms. There was no dizziness, no nausea, and strangely no pain. His mind felt clear, clinging to the fading edges of a wonderful, incredibly intense dream. As he sat up, memories of the previous evening trickled back, Cecile promising to treat him, his trip to the bathroom to wash up, but beyond that point, his recollection dissolved into a blank void. He realized with a start that he was completely naked, a fact that bewildered him as he surveyed the unervingly tidy room. Oswald rose from the bed, marveling at the sensation of his own body. It felt lighter than it ever had before, vibrant with an energy he hadn't possessed since the banquet where Cecile had first sprayed him with her potion. Suspicion immediately took root. He deduced that the memory loss was undoubtedly a side effect of whatever suspicious treatment Cecile Rosewood had performed. Moving to the mirror, he inspected his reflection and froze. The black wound that had plagued him was completely gone, leaving his skin flawless. Disbelief warred with the visual evidence. It should have been impossible for such a deep, cursed wound to heal completely in a single night. He questioned whether Cecile had been hiding an ace up her sleeve the entire time, concealing her true capabilities. Determined to extract the truth, Oswald dressed and strode down the hallway, intent on holding her accountable the moment he saw her. He anticipated her reaction, imagining she would respond with her characteristic arrogance and confidence, perhaps twice the argument he could muster. He wondered if she was deliberately enjoying his confusion or if she had simply used him as a test subject to further her medical skills. A scenario played out in his mind where she would smugly admit to hiding her abilities, asking if the healing wasn't enough to justify the means just to stop him from talking. In his imagination, he countered her arrogance by pulling her close and silencing her with a kiss, a fantasy that ended with her rationalizing that they both won, he with his health, and she with her valuable data. The intensity of the thought brought him to a halt. A vivid image of Cecile flashed in his mind, her small figure, her pale skin glowing under the dim light of the room's lamp. He shook his head, trying to separate reality from the haze. There was a gap in his memory, yet the sensation of waking up naked in a suspiciously tidy room pointed undeniably to Cecile's treatment. It felt unnatural, distinct from his previous fantasies. The image of her that persisted in his mind felt like a real memory, etched into his psyche with a vividness that suggested it was more than a dream. He reasoned that if the treatment involved detoxification or curse-breaking, and if she had resorted to the method he suspected, the implications were staggering. Oswald's search of the house yielded nothing. The living room corner where she usually slept was perfectly tidy, but Cecile was gone. Panic began to set in. He searched everywhere, finding no trace of her. The frustration mounted, compounded by the singular, hazy scene stuck in his head. A terrifying thought seized him. If her treatment relied on direct physical contact, and if he had, in his forgotten state, hurt her or forced her into something she didn't want, the guilt would be unbearable. A gnawing anxiety tore him apart from the inside. He imagined her fleeing in tears, seeking help from the villagers because she could no longer bear to be near him. The possibility that he had forced her against her will terrified him. He rushed to the door, desperate to find her, swearing that he could never harm a woman or force her into anything. He threw the door open, ready to charge into the storm, only to find Cecile standing there on the threshold, holding an umbrella and laden with bags. The sudden shift from panic to relief left him momentarily stunned. He stammered, asking what she was doing and where she had been. Cecile, looking calm and dry beneath her umbrella, explained she had been buying supplies, claiming she realized she had forgotten a few things despite their shopping trip the previous day. She casually asked how his body was feeling, deflecting the intensity of his reaction. Back inside, as Cecile unpacked the excessive amount of food, Oswald confronted her. He acknowledged that the treatment had been successful, as the scars on his chest had completely disappeared and his health was better than it had been in months. However, he demanded to know exactly what she had done to him, as he remembered nothing of the process. Cecile maintained her composure, explaining that memory loss was a specific side effect of this radical treatment. She contrasted it with her previous methods, which relied on special tools to gradually absorb dark energy, a slower, less taxing process with minimal side effects. This time, she claimed, she had targeted the root of the problem directly, resulting in a quick and highly effective cure, but the unavoidable cost was the loss of a part of his memory. Oswald refused to accept this sanitized explanation. As Cecile tried to walk away, chattering about the rainy weather and meeting someone in the village, he grabbed her arm. He declared that her story didn't make sense, a treatment couldn't be considered complete so easily, and while he had gaps in his memory, he hadn't forgotten everything. He demanded she tell him the truth. The air between them grew thick with tension. Oswald pulled her closer, his face inches from hers, desperate to bridge the gap in his mind and understand the reality of the intimacy he sensed had occurred. He accused her of treating him like a lab rat and demanded a clear explanation, his voice dropping to a plea as he sought the truth of what she had done to him. Just as the moment reached its breaking point, the front door burst open. "Did I arrive at a bad time again?" a cheerful voice called out, shattering the atmosphere. It was Zach Reed, standing in the doorway, completely soaked from the sudden downpour. The situation descended instantly into awkwardness. Cecile, flushed and flustered, immediately tried to dismiss him, thanking him for the supplies but suggesting he leave immediately. Zach, oblivious or perhaps choosing to ignore the tension, laughed off her coldness, noting the heavy rain and his soaked state. The conversation quickly shifted to professional matters, the levity vanishing as Zack laid out the gravity of the situation. He confirmed Oswald's suspicion that the seal in the region had been broken. This area, known as the Land of the Seal, was currently plagued by roaming magical beasts, a direct result of the seal's failure. Zack revealed that understanding the sealing spells and locating the breach would require the cooperation of both white and black sorcerers. Reports confirmed that the Witch of Tyranny had once been imprisoned here, sealed within the mountains by one of Oswald's own ancestors, a duke from his family line. Zack conveyed the urgency of the mission. The Holy Knight squad was already busy protecting the sorcerers and eliminating beasts, but reinforcements were needed. He explained that elite groups were en route, Lindsay representing the black sorcerers, and Lorelei arriving with a chosen team of white sorcerers. They were also mobilizing troops to search for a mysterious black wolf. Zack looked at Oswald with expectation, stating that if his wounds were healed, he was needed immediately at the Knight's camp to take command. Oswald, however, had other plans. Despite his miraculous recovery, he flatly refused to return to the camp. Leaning back with a defiant air, he declared that he was still in recovery and, having been caught in the heavy rain, predicted he would likely come down with a fever by tomorrow. He announced that he would command from the cabin, moving between the camp and Cecile's location, effectively using a feigned illness as an excuse to stay by her side. Zack recognized the transparent excuse immediately, questioning the logic of predicting a fever a day in advance. Unmoved, Oswald stated he would be waiting there, challenging anyone with objections to come directly to him, cementing his decision to remain in the house where the lines between patient, healer, and lovers had become irrevocably blurred. In the territory of Delart, governed by Duke Freya, a mountainous landscape dominates the horizon, harboring ancient secrets within its rocky grasp. A narrative unfolds regarding a sacred peak where a visitor once stumbled upon the peculiar remnants of a seal situated halfway up the ascent. Recognizing the sanctity of the location, this observer felt compelled to leave the atmosphere undisturbed, noting that the first Duke Freya had once uncovered a retainer possessed by a demon in this very spot. History records that the Duke, wielding a demon-banishing sword, struck down the possessed to protect his king. Further research into village documents reveals that this land was sealed by a former Duke Freya, named Leskar Griva, designating it a protected territory to contain whatever lay within. Oswald, a man of sharp features and intense focus, pores over these historical accounts, his mind piecing together the fragmented legacy of the sealed tale that persists only as rumors regarding a saint's monsters. He stands amidst a backdrop of rugged terrain and climbing gear, his research leading him to a mountain journal from 4 generations prior. He deduces that the seal related to the so-called witch failed to pass down to successive dukes, leaving a gap in their history. Consequently, Oswald enacted a ban on human entry into the area, establishing a wide restricted zone to ensure its protection. He notes that decades ago, a couple who heard the rumors ventured from a nameless village toward the peak, and he suspects they might hold the key to the mystery. Closing the heavy book, he concludes his investigation of the sealed land, satisfied with the results of his research regarding the witch. Elsewhere, the atmosphere shifts to a domestic yet tense setting involving Cecil. She questions why Lord Oswald remains, despite his treatment concluding, expressing her confusion over his presence. She recalls sending him off with the assurance that he could return to work, yet he lingers. Oswald, appearing exasperated, retorts that her complaints merely get in the way, insisting on his plan to help. Cecil snaps back, ordering him to sit elsewhere if he refuses to assist, highlighting the friction between them. Her internal monologue reveals her anxiety. She checked on his condition after a rainy day when he seemed unusually unwell. She harbors a deep-seated fear that once Oswald fully returns to his normal life, he will depart forever, marking the end of their time together. In the kitchen, Cecil sits surrounded by a basket of potatoes, her hands busy with the repetitive task of peeling. Oswald leans over her, his presence looming large as he questions her solitary effort in peeling such a ridiculous amount for just the two of them. Cecil defends the task, likening the food to medicine. Despite her belief that he wouldn't return, he came back that very night and has spent the last 5 days shuttling between the village investigation team and her location. Oswald explains his recent treatment, which involves using large hot stones to warm the body, a method he has been investigating alongside his inquiries into the healing method from a specific night. He invades Cecil's personal space, his proximity overwhelming her as she realizes he is close enough to touch. He remarks that she likely removed her clothes herself due to the heat, a comment that flusters her. Cecil perceives his actions as a deliberate strategy. He attempts to regain memories lost to him through physical contact, closing the distance between them and touching her with calculated intent. She answers his questions vaguely, but his dissatisfaction drives him to persist. A flashback or perhaps a concurrent thought reveals Oswald's disdain for the rustic life. He complains about the lack of entertainment in the forest, contrasting it with drinking parties in the dining hall. He dismisses Cecil, telling her to go play if she won't help cut vegetables, treating her with a casual disregard that stings. Cecil, feeling the weight of her own insecurities, laments her role as a burdensome healer, conscious of her need to lose weight but unable to stop eating. Back in the present, the dynamic shifts to the living room. Oswald sits comfortably on a plush sofa, patting the empty space beside him on the cushion, signaling for Cecil to approach. He challenges her hesitation, asking what she imagines he intends to do. Cecil, guarded and skeptical, questions his inactivity, to which he claims he plans nothing at all. He commands her to sit down, dismissing her wary posture as a misunderstanding similar to a previous meeting. Cecil complies but emits a despairing sound as she settles onto his lap, prompting Oswald to remark that it is the first time someone has made such a noise upon sitting with him. He squeezes her, comparing her to a stuffed animal that makes weird noises, while she protests the treatment. Oswald threatens to force-feed her a laxative if she doesn't calm down, while Cecil frantically worries about the mashed potatoes she still needs to prepare. Despite her protest to be released, the physical contact triggers a memory of a specific role she played, complicating her emotions. Oswald nuzzles into her hair, the intimacy escalating as he questions her plan to cook immediately after dinner. Cecil observes the expression on his face, a look that strikes a chord of familiarity within her, though she struggles to place it. She asks if something happened, sensing a shift in his demeanor. Oswald, internally, reflects on his interactions with her. He listens without specific feeling, recalling that upon their first meeting, she seemed reserved and quiet. He questions why he directs such an expression toward her, warning himself not to speak his thoughts aloud. He ponders the undefined nature of their relationship and wonders what exactly transpired between them. Cecil, meanwhile, finds herself reacting unexpectedly to his touch. Unlike before, his contact brings her happiness and a ticklish sensation, leading her to desire more. Oswald breaks her reverie, asking if she is thinking strange things. Cecil stammers a denial, refuting any indecent or perverted thoughts. Internally, she reaffirms her love for this version of Oswald but worries she may have made a move and been rejected, or perhaps confessed and faced a turn down. Oswald remains focused on the past, pressing her about the events between them. Oswald's mind drifts to a recollection of the Second Demonic Beast Subjugation War, where he and a partner scouted a region suspected of hiding beasts. He recalls the rainy atmosphere and the warning from Lorelei, who stood beside him, regarding a powerful beast in a specific area. Oswald expresses skepticism about Lorelei Conrad, the figure worshipped by many, questioning if her spotless and pure reputation is a facade. The memory deepens. They discovered a large fallen tree serving as the beast's lair in the dark, rainy forest. Lorelei's sensory abilities proved accurate. Oswald and his subordinate were ordered to confirm the beast's strength before the main subjugation. Upon attempting to return to base, they spotted a pure white robe fluttering in the shadows, followed by the sound of a warning whistle. Oswald panicked, believing Lorelei had been attacked, and rushed toward the scene. However, he found no one there. Instead, he saw elaborate enchanted threads he assumed belonged to Lorelei. The reality of the memory twists. Oswald discovered it was his subordinate being dragged and pinned by a beast. He reasoned that a magical attack must have driven the beast off, momentarily hoping Lorelei had sensed the danger and intervened. However, help never arrived. Oswald cements his distrust, unable to believe that a noble saint like Lorelei, capable of sensing enemies, would fail to appear. He acknowledges that Lorelei Conrad has flaws. She acts with humility, joining the front lines and supporting others with defensive spells, yet he remains skeptical. Oswald recalls the gossip-ridden social circles where Lorelei was slandered. Despite rumors spread by young ladies about her living near the castle, Lorelei maintained a compassionate and open demeanor, which Oswald admits is admirable. He realizes, however, that he never truly spoke with her, attributing his isolation to his status as a dropout who was always shadowing Master Curtis. Returning to the present moment on the couch, Oswald continues to hold Cecil. He notes that Master Curtis is pulling back, and connects his past distrust of Lorelei to his current feelings. He admits he felt Cecil was being sent off just as he was. A realization strikes him. He questions why Master Curtis was always with him, acknowledging his own shortcomings as a dropout. He pieces together the details of the beast attack. The story claimed the beast abandoned the victim and fled, leading Oswald to identify the wound on Cecil's chest as originating from that very event. He asks if his subordinate was saved. Oswald reveals the gruesome detail that the beast tried to forcibly extract the magic core from his subordinate's chest. He explains that a human's magic core is crystallized bone near the heart. His attack shattered the core. The beast took half, while the other half remained in the subordinate. He notes the subordinate's defiance in refusing to yield to the beast. Oswald's demeanor softens into intimacy. He kisses Cecil, asking if the person survived and teasing her for a sexier sound. The atmosphere becomes charged as Oswald presses closer, admitting he is not used to such interactions. Cecil, overwhelmed, rationalizes that it cannot be helped, feeling she is not special to him. She suspects he touches her solely to regain his memories. Yet, as he kisses her, she finds herself wishing he would hold her longer. Suddenly, Oswald breaks the spell. He abruptly tells her to return to peeling potatoes before morning comes. He accuses her of being sexually frustrated and having erotic fantasies about the vegetables, mocking her lustful eyes. He suggests she go to the capital and find a lover to handle her needs. Cecil is taken aback. Oswald, flustered and blushing, defensively shouts that he does not have a lover or anyone he loves, demanding she stop fabricating his love life and just peel the potatoes. Cecil tries to empathize, suggesting his lack of memory must be painful. Oswald snaps, declaring that she understands nothing and that her ignorance is what causes pain. The scene transitions to Captain Cleaver receiving a report from Lindsay Glode, one of the 7 heroes and chief of the Black Mages. Lindsay reports that there was little written about the witch, but notes she is even smaller than Cecil. Meanwhile, Oswald's thoughts consume him. He recalls the sensation of touching Cecil the previous night, specifically noticing a bruising mark under her ear. He observes that it did not resemble an insect bite or a standard bruise. His mind fixates on how perfectly she fits in his arms and her softness. However, the mark disturbs him. He wonders if someone other than himself put it there, questioning who and where it happened. Driven by this new obsession, he turns to Lindsay with a small request, his mind swirling with unanswered questions. Deep within the forest, the day began with a lingering sense of solitude for the young woman, Cecil. Having spent the last few days recovering from the absorption of residual evil energy, she found herself navigating the quiet confines of the house alone. Lord Oswald had departed for the sealed land early that morning, a routine departure that had become familiar since the chaotic events involving the potatoes days prior. Cecil moved through her chores with a heavy slowness, the effects of her magical exhaustion still clinging to her limbs. She realized with a sudden jolt that the household stock of firewood had been depleted. As she prepared to venture out, a wave of vertigo washed over her, a reminder that she needed to consume food to maintain consciousness, lest she succumb to the deep, comatose sleep that often plagued her after expending large amounts of energy. Her thoughts drifted back to the rainy night that had started it all. A presence had been lingering around the estate, a watcher in the shadows. Standing by the window, Cecil recalled the sight of a massive, wolf-like creature sitting amidst the trees. It was no ordinary beast. Unlike the rugged fur of a natural wolf or the twisted aura of a monster, this creature was wreathed in a strange, shimmering energy that oscillated with a magical hum. As a white witch, Cecil possessed the innate ability to sense magical creatures, and her instincts told her that this being was composed of power rather than flesh and blood. It had been appearing intermittently, its gaze fixed upward at the house with a silent, vigilant intensity. She had kept this discovery to herself, choosing not to burden Lord Oswald with the information just yet. This silent guardian had appeared again recently, manifesting just as Cecil stepped outside for a shopping trip. The memory of their interaction played vividly in her mind. The creature had not threatened her. Instead, it had approached with a docility that contradicted its formidable appearance. She remembered declining Sir Zach's offer of a carriage, opting instead to walk. In a moment of impulsive curiosity, she had asked the wolf to assist her. Surprisingly, the creature had obliged, carrying her packages and following her dutifully all the way to the village. Now, looking at the creature sitting obediently near the house, she felt a dilemma. She could not simply leave such a potent magical entity unattended while Lord Oswald slept, yet the creature showed no signs of aggression. It merely sat, glancing back at the house with a reluctance to depart, revealing itself only when the area was devoid of other human presence. While the official investigation team scoured the area for reports of a wolf-like cryptid, Cecil had allowed it to remain, sensing no malice in its aura. However, the tranquility of the afternoon was shattered when the wolf suddenly stiffened. Its ears perked, and its posture shifted from relaxed observer to predatory hunter. Cecil watched as the beast bolted, its attention locked on a small, dark shape fluttering through the air. It was a messenger, a construct of the Black Mage. The wolf moved with supernatural speed, intercepting the dark messenger. Cecil chased after them, her breath catching in her throat as she questioned the wolf's intent. The creature wasn't just chasing, it was hunting. The wolf cornered the messenger, a small, bat-like entity carrying a red, glowing orb. With a burst of movement, the silver wolf struck, destroying the dark construct in a shower of dissipating magic. Cecil arrived moments later, observing the aftermath. Unlike previous encounters where such messengers radiated heavy, suffocating evil energy, this one felt different. It carried no malicious payload, suggesting its purpose was purely surveillance. Cecil crouched, analyzing the fading remnants. She realized that the messenger had likely been protected by a defensive spell, preventing her from capturing it intact for interrogation, especially with so many potential witnesses nearby. The wolf, having completed its task, looked at her, its shimmering form standing out against the forest backdrop. It had prevented a report from being sent, protecting their location from the prying eyes of the enemy. Meanwhile, in a location shrouded in shadows, the orchestrator of the dark surveillance grew impatient. Lady Lorelei, a woman of striking beauty masking a rotten core, stood amidst the trees, her expression one of cold irritation. She received the fragmented feedback from her destroyed messenger, the lack of a concrete report serving as a frustration. She spoke to a hooded figure beside her, her voice dripping with disdain. She revealed the depth of her deception. She had usurped her current vessel while it was still a fetus, masking her true dark nature with an air of purity to infiltrate society. Yet, the persistent interference of light-based magic continued to hinder her full power, an annoyance she found increasingly intolerable. Lorelei turned her scrutiny toward the hooded figure, questioning the progress on the witch Lindsay. She demanded to know if the interrogation had yielded results. The hooded figure, keeping their face obscured, suggested that repeating the same questions might be a waste of time. Lorelei's eyes narrowed. She was not a woman who tolerated inefficiency. She mused aloud about the methods she should employ to force the truth from her captive. Violence seemed the most appealing option. She fantasized about tearing the witch apart, spilling her insides to break her spirit. Alternatively, she considered setting her hidden monsters upon the woman or, more insidiously, taking over her magic core just as she had done with the knight previously. The prospect of creating a magical beast from a powerful witch's body, one stronger than her previous failed attempts, brought a cruel smile to her face. She envisioned extracting the core, consuming it, and regaining the lost power of the strongest witch, Hortensia. Back at the cottage, the sun had begun to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of deep orange and bruising purple. Cecil jerked awake, realizing she had fallen asleep again after returning with the firewood. The passage of time disoriented her. A heavy, rhythmic thudding sound echoed from outside, drawing her attention to the door. She opened it to find the silver wolf standing there, its demeanor urgent. It barked once, a sharp sound that demanded attention, and turned its body as if gesturing for her to follow. Cecil hesitated only for a heartbeat before sensing the gravity of the beast's behavior. An unsettling feeling of dread pooled in her stomach as she stepped out into the twilight. The wolf led her away from the cottage, moving with a speed that forced Cecil to run. They headed toward the boundary of the sealed land and the village where the investigation team resided. As she ran, Cecil pieced together the wolf's previous actions. By destroying the messenger, it hadn't just been hunting, it had been concealing Lord Oswald's location. It had been watching the house not to threaten, but to guard. The anxiety in her chest tightened as they arrived at a clearing where a group of knights had gathered. The scene that greeted her confirmed her worst fears. A cart sat in the center of the clearing, surrounded by grim-faced knights. Lying in the back of the wagon was Lord Oswald, his uniform stained with dark, spreading blood. Sir Zack stood nearby, his expression grave. He informed Cecil that they had been attacked by a magical beast on their return route. Oswald had sustained terrible wounds, yet he had adamantly refused treatment from the White Witches unit stationed with the investigation team. Cecil rushed to the cart, her hands trembling as she reached for Oswald. The wolf, Pochi, stood silently by the wheel, its job of fetching her complete. Cecil looked at the creature, acknowledging its intelligence. It had known that Oswald needed help that only she could provide, or perhaps it knew that Oswald would only accept help from her. The knights moved Oswald into the house, laying him carefully on the bed. The atmosphere was thick with tension and the metallic scent of blood. Cecil immediately began her assessment of the injuries. The primary wound was catastrophic, a deep gash that shore through muscle down to the white of the bone. But the physical trauma was only half the danger. The wound festered with a dark, pulsating miasma of evil energy, a taint left behind by the beast that had attacked him. This corruption actively resisted healing, eating away at the flesh and preventing the blood from clotting. Cecil summoned her magic, her hands glowing with a soft, white light, but as she pressed them against the wound, the light flickered and dimmed against the overwhelming darkness of the injury. Panic began to set in. Her magic was insufficient. The bleeding was profuse, soaking the sheets and staining her hands crimson. She realized with horrifying clarity that standard first aid and her current level of magical output would not be enough to save him. The evil energy was too potent, the life force draining from him too rapidly. Despair clawed at her throat. She felt the crushing weight of her own inadequacy. She was a failure. She lacked the raw power to purge the corruption and knit the flesh in time. Her mind raced for alternatives. She couldn't call for help from the village. The White Witches there were under the command of Lorelei, and involving them would alert the enemy to their location and Oswald's vulnerability. She was isolated, outmatched, and running out of time. Tears welled in her eyes, blurring her vision as she looked at Oswald's pale, unconscious face. She needed a miracle. She needed to trade something of equal value for his life. A dangerous resolve hardened in her eyes. Cecil stopped her frantic, ineffectual healing and shifted her magical flow. She began to weave a different spell, a forbidden technique passed down through whispers among white witches. It was a spell of ultimate sacrifice, life force conversion. She prepared to convert her own life energy entirely into healing power, a transaction that would save Oswald at the cost of her own existence. The air around her grew cold as she initiated the sequence, her own vitality beginning to flare as fuel. Suddenly, a hand clamped down on her wrist with bruising force. The spell shattered, the energy dissipating harmlessly into the room. Cecil looked up, startled and teary-eyed, to see a tall, elegant figure standing over her. It was her master, the reclusive and powerful Duke Freya. His expression was a mixture of fury and disappointment. He scolded her sharply, his voice cutting through her panic. He called the spell she was about to use ultimate self-satisfaction, a foolish act of martyrdom. The master released her wrist but kept his piercing gaze fixed on her. He lectured her sternly, stating that sacrificing her life was meaningless if the person she saved continued to throw their own life away recklessly. He questioned what she thought she was doing, engaging in such a fatal transaction without exhausting other options. Cecil stammered, overwhelmed by his sudden appearance and the shame of her near suicide. The master pushed her aside gently but firmly, taking her place at Oswald's bedside. He examined the wound with a critical eye. Even as he worked, he continued to dismantle Cecil's self-perception. He acknowledged her weakness in direct healing magic, calling her a failure in that specific regard. The words stung, but they were followed by a pivot. He reminded her that while she lacked raw healing power, she possessed other exceptional talents. Her aptitude for potions, curse-breaking, and poison neutralization was unrivaled. She had the intelligence to turn those abilities into solutions, yet she had reverted to a brute force sacrifice in her panic. He looked at her, his expression softening slightly. He asked why she hadn't used that intelligence to call him. He reminded her of the purpose of the White Witch's village and the bond between master and disciple. They existed to ensure that no one was abandoned, that no life was lost in vain. By trying to shoulder the burden alone and resorting to suicide, she had insulted the very foundation of their teachings. Cecil wiped her tears, confused and relieved. She asked how he was here, as he never left the village. The master's face grew serious. He revealed that he had been contacted by a black witch, a traitor or informant from the other side, who had provided critical information and a request for an investigation. Given the sensitive nature of the intelligence, he had broken his seclusion to handle the matter personally. He looked down at Oswald, then back at Cecil, commanding her to bring the relevant people to him. He needed to know exactly what had happened, and he was there to take control of the situation. The silver wolf sat in the corner, watching the scene unfold, its shimmering form fading slightly as the crisis passed, the immediate danger of death averted by the intervention of a true master.